Deb is having knee surgery today.
Oh, no.
That's a good excuse.
No, it's not a replacement. What? Just a little meniscus. Good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Terry, we live and in color?
Live and in color.
For those that have nothing better to do. Okay. This is the regularly scheduled Town of Nantucket Board of Appeals meeting, Thursday, December 10th, 2015. Can I get an approval of the agenda as written?
Okay, motion.
Michael makes the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the approval of the minutes, November 12th, 2015. I read them. They look fine to me.
I'll make the motion.
Lisa makes a motion to approve as written. Michael seconds it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, so old business, 3115, Angelic Real Estate, LLP, 1 Kite Hill Lane. For the applicant, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the applicant, Attorney John Brescher, I represent Angelic Real Estate 13 Company. All the owners of 1 Kite Hill Lane. This is the third time we've been before you now. Just a quick recap of where we've been. Originally, we applied for a zoning administrator decision for an alteration of the structure, put a full foundation beneath the existing structure at 1 Kite Hill Lane. That decision was subsequently appealed, and we came before you with a special permit request for the same. Just to briefly recap, the locus is an undersized lot of record having approximately 1,787 square feet in the ROH, which requires a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. The premises also has less than 50 feet of frontage on the required zoning district. The existing structure has 510 square feet of ground cover and is non-conforming with respect to side and rear yard setbacks, being 1.3 feet from the westerly side lot line, 3 feet from the easterly side lot line, and 2.8 feet from the rear lot line, which requires a setback. The structure has been there since well before 1972. As we mentioned from the get-go, the proposal was to physically lift the structure and put a full foundation beneath. After we heard from the neighbors and from the board, we have decided that it would be more advantageous to go with the underpinning method that was suggested. And so we have submitted a construction methodology and your plans to the board for that. Again, as a result of putting this basement in there, there will be no change in ground cover. There will be no change in height. The structure will look exactly as it is on the ground. And the issue before us is whether or not the nonconformity will be increased as a result of putting in this basement, and we believe that it is not. I also feel that the underpinning method will be the least intrusive. And we thought from the start this was a benign project. Which was why we even went with the zoning administrator decision in the first place. We thought that was so relatively unobtrusive because there's no change in ground cover, no change in non-conformity. We think that what you see before you and what we've submitted is a thoughtful response to both board and neighbor concerns. And we have anticipated some of the conditions that we think the board would want to see in the decision, and we've added that to the construction methodology. I have Frank Daly and Steve Goen here who can answer questions much better than I can relative to the methodology.
Okay, thanks. Assuming everybody looked at the stuff, you're going with the underpinning method, in essence, which we talked about.
Yep.
There was a letter, I think, just recently submitted today, I think, from Mr. Stover. If anybody didn't get a chance to read it, why don't we take a moment to read it? I read it already, but other members might not have had a chance.
I just
So,
read it.
did you get a chance to read it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did you say you read it, Michael? No.
Yeah, I mean, I got.
So we're all good, okay. So any questions from the board? Any?
Did the
Thoughts?
applicant get a chance to look at it?
Yes, we received a letter last evening.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's page 49 of our packet, the new methodology summary, if you will, is included along with the engineered plans which show the underpinning methods, or, not methods, but some detail. Yeah. Go ahead.
You wanna have the chocolate?
I need my chocolate now. Anyway, so if we're good with that, do we have specific questions for?
I did see a letter from the builder discussing the fact that they weren't going to use Kite Hill Lane for parking, and I guess I want that to go into the record.
Well, my thought, Michael, was that we would incorporate either the daily construction narrative as an exhibit to the decision, or we could also make it so that it wasn't specific to daily construction in case daily construction ends up not doing it for some reason. But we could just,
Even better.
if we're okay with it, I mean, we can quickly go through it, but it seems to cover everything: no vibrating, no exterior sheet piling, exterior dimensions of the foundation will remain as they are, access to Kite Hill Lane will remain open.
And the depth of the foundation is, let's see, 8 feet?
Well, that same thing would apply to the page,
The detail sheet.
the detail sheet,
Yeah.
and or the other structural drawings submitted by Steve Cohen.
S1 and
Right,
SO.
they would become part of the
Mhm.
decision.
Okay.
Then we need to discuss briefly whether or not we are comfortable with that vis-a-vis the letter from John Stover.
He's basically just
Maybe
saying-
Arthur's here to speak about that.
Yes, first of all, I want to make it clear that my clients are still strongly opposed to this project, and we'll be giving you more additional reasons on that. Let me first address the report from John Stover. Obviously, we appreciate the fact that the project is now proposed to be done by the underpinning method. It's obviously a much safer approach in terms of impact, physical impact upon the surrounding properties, but it's not free of problems. And specifically in John's letter, he points out that soil testing needs to be done. We haven't seen any indication that soil tests have been done, and that the soil conditions on the site are going to provide adequate lateral support while construction is in process. Very, very close to the lot line. In fact, John suggests that it normally would be a 1-to-1, that for every foot you go down, you'd be able to come out a foot. Obviously, that's not possible on this project, and we don't know whether the effect of doing the work is going to be that you will have physical instability along the outside of the area where the work is being done. And with all due respect, it does not appear that there has been the input, as we've been suggesting all along, and John mentions in his letter. And by the way, John is off island, so he wasn't able to be here today. that there would be a geotechnical engineer specifically devoted to the work on the project. John has mentioned that. Carl Jellamy had mentioned that he would not do the work if it were up to him to do without there being a specific geotechnical engineer assigned to the project and able to directly comment on those conditions. We consider that this project is an intensification which will have an adverse effect upon the neighborhood. You have letters from basically everybody in the Kite Hill neighborhood that indicate their opposition to the project and their concern about the impact it will have on their properties. My clients specifically, the McGraths, who are directly abutting the locus, and also the Dillards, who are also appellants, directly across Kite Hill Lane, which is a private easement. It's not even a private way. It's it's part of the lot that belongs to one of the other owners on Kite Hill. That's the only access in to the property. This lot is extremely small. It's been used as a dwelling for some time. It was originally, as I understand it, the barn that was part of the property next door where the McGraths are the present owners, and was converted some years ago to being a dwelling. It's very close to the lot line on both sides and the rear. At the last meeting, we were told that the number of bedrooms in the basement that were proposed to be added were being reduced from 2 to 1. That basically doesn't really change the impact or the extent of the intensification upon the neighborhood, because you're going to be able to get just as many people in one big bedroom as you could in two smaller ones. As far as the exit is concerned, what had been described as being a window well, in fact, winds up being not a window well at all, but a exit staircase on the exterior of the building. We haven't seen new plans that show that specifically. They were discussed at the last meeting, but I don't believe you have any new submission that depicts all of that. And as was pointed out by some of the members at the last meeting, this is just a very, very tight site. It's a non-conforming situation right now. The size of the lot is much smaller than it should be. The size of the setback, the width of the setbacks is far too small. In the event that someone had to come out the proposed window or door, which is what it really is, into the staircase on the outside to get up to the ground level, they're either going to be passing through an area that's a little more than 1 foot between the foundation and the lot line on that side of the building, or they're going to be in about a 3-foot, a longer run through about a 3-foot width at the most on the other sides of the building, trying to run around potentially a burning building in the event of a fire. We think this is a dangerous situation, a bad situation for the neighborhood, and that the Board of Appeals should determine that the applicants have not met the statutory and bylaw requirement that the applicant show that the proposed intensification, the proposed change, will not have a substantially more adverse effect on the neighborhood. Thank you. I know my client and several other people here also would have some comments on this.
Okay, thank you.
I have some visuals, because I know you have plans in front of you. I think often pictures speak 1,000 words, and I have this for everybody to see, and then I have handouts. You can each take one, pass it down. I appreciate it. I don't think there's anything
All
banal.
right, you need to go to probably, can everybody hear?
I'll speak up.
And just identify yourself for the cameras.
Well, there's enough for everybody. I don't think this is a benign project at all.
Hold on one second, just identify yourself.
I'm sorry. Linda McGrath, good afternoon. I'm Linda McGrath from 12 Cliff Road. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in opposition to the special permit being sought by the investment owners of One Kite Hill. Despite the fact that the Kite Hill Investment Group has adopted the less impactful excavation approach. According to John Stover, our building engineer consultant, even underpinning is not without its inherent risks, given the tight proximity of the adjacent properties. Many other issues have yet to be satisfactorily addressed, including the question of increased nonconformity and whether the proposal is more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconformity. The first photo, which is the picture of the cottage, shows just how very tight the conditions are. On the east side, my property is 3 feet away, my privet 4 feet, my patio 5 feet, my house 9 feet. On the west side, 3 Kite Hill's property line is 16 inches away. At the rear, which you cannot see, there's less than 2 feet, there's less than 3 feet, there's 2 feet 8 inches at the back. There is no front, back, or side yard. There is no yard, period. The parking lot is just adequate for 1 car. The shells indicate the lane, which, as you recall, is a private lane owned by 5 Kite Hill. It's 10 feet wide. The few parking spaces are private and fiercely monitored by the existing homeowners. There can be no blocking of the lane. There is no outlet. There is no room for large vehicles. There is zero capacity for excess traffic as the lane barely accommodates the cars belonging to 357 Kite and 86 Center. Even landscapers and the rubbish removal guys have to walk up the hill. The second photo is the annotated copy of the applicant's survey and illustrates in red the parts of the structure that are within the 5 feet setback zone. Over 70% of the house is non-conforming. The perimeter of the house is non-conforming and violates the setback. Only a very small percentage of the house, 2 linear feet on the west side and a small portion at the front, are conforming. The emergency exit egress, which we have yet to fully vet at these hearings, is a structure and should not be referred to as a window well. It is anything but a window well, and is a further encroachment on the required, though already violated, 5-foot setback. It would certainly seem to increase the nonconformity of the existing property. It has been further pointed out by John Stover that there must be both an emergency exit and a safe path away from the house. Where is room for either? We understand from 3 Kite that they fully intend to install a fence. Once that goes in, there will be no quote-unquote wiggle room. There will be insufficient room to escape the side yard in an emergency and wholly inadequate access for an emergency personnel. There would be no room to open the egress grate from the window well, which is shown in the original plan as 64 inches wide and 44 inches deep, and would presumably require a fence and a gate above grade. This is why the 5-foot setback exists as a matter of statute, to ensure life safety and quality of life. Then there is the issue of the intensification of use. There is no doubt that the proposed plan to double the sleeping capacity will increase density and usage. With potential for 8-person occupancy, how could it not? Based on these photos, you have to ask, where will these additional renters live, hang out, cook, and eat? 500 square foot in a tiny lot simply does not provide adequate or safe living space, inside or out. If one intends to safely and responsibly rent to upwards of 8 people, it stands to reason that adequate kitchen, dining, and living space must also be provided to serve your renters' needs without imposing on the neighborhood. There is no choice for these renters, as we experienced this summer on the existing 2-bedroom configuration, other than to spill out into the neighborhood. Francis Cartuno, 67 North Center Street abutter, who's you've heard, family lived at 12 Cliff, whose father built the barn shed, saw these photos last night and said this space is entirely insufficient to safely house more people. It was built as a barn shed, and the fact that it slowly morphed into a single-family dwelling does not warrant its continued expansion or enhancement. Mr. Toole, at the October meeting in November, at the October meeting, you stated that one has the right to repair, renovate, and rent one's property. I couldn't agree more. Repair, absolutely. Rent, yes. Renovate, yes, but not at the risk of adjacent properties or the increased detrimental effect on the neighborhood. As told to Anna Karen and me by one of the investors sitting in the room, and this comes as no surprise, the formula is simple. Increase occupancy in order to increase rental return. This is not conjecture. We are not opposed to the concept of renting. One Kite Hill has always been a rental property for at least the 10 years that I'm aware of it, but with long term and only one couple occupying the house at a time. What we're opposed to is the expansion of the house to accommodate additional renters, and therein lies the increased detrimental effect on the neighborhood and why the entire neighborhood is totally opposed to the plan. As is, one kite rented this past summer for $5,000 a week. You can look it up online. The proposed expansion of this tiny property so that an investment group is able to double the return just doesn't sit right. Their gain comes at our loss. It's an exploitation of the neighborhood. Kite Hill doesn't have the capacity to absorb this increased intensification by short-term renters who care not at all about the neighborhood. In sum, I urge you to please raise these 3 items against the proposed expansion plan. The well-articulated statements of opposition filed by 9 abutters, the serious potential risk of damage to adjacent properties, and the consequences of overdensification and subsequent increased detrimental effect on our neighborhood. Clearly, detrimental is a subjective term and hard to quantify, but who the better abutters of who the better arbiters of detrimental effect than the abutters? So we ask you to please take into account that our homes are our investments and that our rights as pre-existing owners and end users should be given equal, if not more consideration. Left as is, as a 2-bedroom rental property, which it always has been, poses no hardship to the investors. Conversely, should this house become a shared or group rental, and we have no assurances that we won't, in fact all signs point that it will, the surrounding properties will be devalued and the right to a peaceful existence will cease to exist. After all, who will bear the burden? Not the investment group who stands only to gain, but the abettors who will most certainly lose. The modernized preamble of the zoning law states its purpose to promote the health, safety, convenience, morals, and general welfare of the inhabitants, to lessen the danger from fire and congestion, and improve the town. The proposed intensity of use in this case is an assault on the present stated purpose of the zoning law. The plan has been ill-conceived from the beginning. It is not benign. Under the circumstances, it is incredibly overly aggressive and without question invasive. The investment group should not be allowed to move forward with this expansion plan. Simply stated, One Kite is what it is and should remain so. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. While we're on the opposition, is there anybody else in the audience who wants to speak about this one? Opposed? No. Okay. Would you like to comment on those concerns? Just identify yourself. I know you, but the tape doesn't.
My name is Steve Goen. I'm a licensed professional structural engineer, licensed in Massachusetts, both civil and structural. I did a little research on Mr. Stover's experience, and he is practicing engineering, structural engineering. He's a mechanical engineer. He's practicing outside of his field, which is illegal in Massachusetts. I've done work on this island since 1988, projects numbering in approximately 1,500 projects successfully. And all the time that I've worked out here, the only projects I've ever had a geotechnical engineer work on is one that is in a V zone down on the beach on Washington Ave. All of the projects that I've worked on, residential, have been done successfully without a geotechnical engineer. With the background I have and the number of projects that I've worked on, I've seen all of the conditions of the subsurface soils that Nantucket has to bring. The building itself is a light, small building. Underpinning in 3-foot sections does not cause any undue negative effect on the adjacent properties. They were talking about a 45-degree angle outside the building. The next property was measured. It's 13 feet, 12 foot 11 inches away. Our basement is 8 foot clear. We're well within that quote-unquote line of influence. The let's see. As far as the procedures and stuff for the underpinning is done in segments underneath the building, where a small part of the soil is removed each time. It's not like it's going to be a lift of the building where I could see where someone would be concerned. There's going to be no sheet piling or shoring, vibration. So when you're doing a 3-foot segment of soil underneath that's going to be about 4 feet high, the approximate effect around the building is 2 feet, maybe 3. So as far as the geotechnical person coming in on this building, we're going to protect the outlying area and monitor it, and there should not be any issues doing this proposed underpinning. As a professional engineer, that's my first professional
Question.
Go ahead.
Under what situation, if any, would the applicant be required to hire a geotechnical engineer?
As a residential project, they're not required.
So only commercial? Okay.
Can I ask a question too? I mean, I agree with you that it's rare that we use a geotechnical engineer on Nantucket. I mean, if there's
I've done
unusual approach to water. or
once
something, yeah.
in 1,500 buildings.
So, and when we've done this before, we did it on a house on Main Street, a couple houses on Main Street, we did not have a geotechnical engineer, but I just want to clarify something. You said the closest property was 12 feet away?
We measured from
That's to a structure. That's not
structure to
to,
structure.
that's not to property though.
No.
That was the back of my house, I'm sorry, my,
Don't,
it's not true.
But I'm just, but you're
you were
obviously,
allowed to speak. Don't,
you're obviously
please.
closer to other property that's not your own.
Property, yes, but
Yes, okay, I was
the
just clarifying
plan
that.
is to do due diligence to take care of butters' properties. I mean, it's not, this is something that's done all the time successfully.
Mhm.
What were the conditions when you did use a geotechnical engineer?
It was a house on Washington Street in Aviso,
Floating foundation?
piles,
Piles.
wood piles.
And do you see any reason not to do a soil test?
We could do a soil test, but it's a matter of spending more of my client's money
Okay.
and time. I don't know what the overall time frame of the construction process is going to be. I assumed at first that it would be sooner than later, but that really is something up to the owners to figure out. But I mean, for a geotechnical engineer to come out and do soil borings and stuff, you're talking about a boring rig to drill the holes, which could cause vibration. I mean, they're asking us to do something
Couldn't
that
you
really they're
go-
trying to avoid.
Couldn't you go sideways with a hand device?
As in a test pit,
Yeah.
geotechnical engineer probably would require a boring to be able to give you a report, because they'll want to know all the subsurface conditions, which is done with a vibratory hammer.
Mhm.
You drop it, a 30-pound hammer, and it crashes into the ground, and they count the number of blows per foot, and that's how you figure out the soil capacity. So bringing in a geotechnical engineer is going to cause the vibration that they're trying to avoid.
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Any
Does
questions?
anybody else have any questions right now for Steve
Sure.
specifically?
What if you're wrong? Have you thought about?
I'm a licensed professional engineer.
I understand.
Okay, and
My
so-
father was also a licensed professional engineer. He was a civil engineer,
Uh-huh.
and I've been around enough projects to be familiar with it.
Right.
So I can appreciate the fact you're licensed and you're a professional. I'm just saying, devil's advocate, what if
Okay.
you're wrong?
Well, that's why we went to the underpinning instead of digging the full trench.
It's not guaranteed, though.
Well, nothing's really guaranteed. But that being said, I mean, obviously, if we're doing 3-foot excavation trenches and we come up with problems, that's one of the things about doing underpinning is that you can find, if you have issues, you can stop, shore it up, and find another way.
Just help us out here, Steve. What is just go through briefly the underpinning method. You have to dig underneath the entire structure to get to the 3-foot sections, correct?
What's planned is that the porch will be taken out, the bottom level of the porch, the deck area. The front foundation wall will be cut out, and then we'll dig down in and then do approach trenches in segments. And so you just keep on digging, do a trench, and then the concrete is pumped in.
In
And-
3-foot sections.
Yeah.
And you wait till the concrete kicks to do the next section?
No, you do them consecutively. So you do trenches, you do a couple of locations, and you come off at another angle, you do other locations. So it's done in a continuous procedure, but only in segments where the existing foundation wall can span from spot to spot. So it's spanning over the soil that's there or the hole that you placed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What is the condition of the existing foundation?
It's a concrete block wall. I did not see any cracks or any issues with that.
Okay. Any further questions for Steve? No? All righty. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to address some of the,
You gotta identify yourself, please.
John Brescher.
Oh, you already did,
I
actually.
did.
I forgot. It's been so long. Sorry.
Quite all right, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to address some of the zoning issues that we have here. And really, I don't want this to be categorized, and I think we're being unfairly categorized as renters and developers. We reached out to the abutters as soon as the appeal was filed to see if there's any way that we can make this a palatable, amenable, neighborly project.
You need to
Sorry.
speak up, yeah.
Do we have a mic that works? Does that mic work?
Should be working.
Why don't you go to the mic,
I'll
please?
go to the mic. Is this better?
Yeah.
Again, I just want to say that I think that we're being sort of a negative light is unfairly cast upon us. That we have been trying to be neighborly. We understand that it is a neighborhood. We reached out as soon as the appeal was filed to see if there was anything that we could do, sort of to come to some sort of compromise, some sort of some way to make this project more palatable for everyone. And we didn't. Clearly, we did not get any favorable responses. And we've been trying to take into account the concerns of the board, concerns of the neighbors, and this is what we're trying to do with the underpinning. I mean, the Board of Appeals, I appreciate the concerns about the intensification of use, et cetera. It's not within the Board of Appeals' purview to regulate bedrooms, to regulate rentals. We went through this on the at the first hearing, and I believe we even touched on it at the November hearing. Furthermore, with respect to life safety issues, if there's also a second prong to this entire project, and then we have to go through the building department. We have, Steve Butler has to review all these plans, and if it's not going to pass with him, then we've got to change something. We have to figure that out. But my point is that some of these concerns are not. This is not necessarily the proper venue for them, because there is another mechanism, and that is the building department. With respect to the number of bedrooms, I understand that it has been reduced. We did a quick calculation, and the number of bedrooms per square footage on our property is less than that at 12 Cliff Road. So while I appreciate the concern, I mean, the intensification of use is not what we're getting at here. I understand that it is protecting the neighborhood, but at the same point, or at the same time, what we're talking about is the alteration of the structure, and that's what we're here for.
Okay. Help me out here again. By going to the single bedroom downstairs, you don't need the window well anymore.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Why isn't the stair
Because you need
adequate?
2 means of egress out of the bedroom. One has to be a window, or
Why can't you get out of the door and or up the stairs? I mean, you don't need two in a basement
well,
bedroom.
yeah, I don't understand the door. Not that it's it's our purview, but I don't understand how the egress stair works coming out of that porch. But I think they have a door down here.
Door to the outside.
Well, it comes out under the porch.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily it's under the porch
It's under
roof,
the
but
porch
it's
roof.
not under deck.
That's right.
So my point is that to the objection that
If it-
it's unsafe,
If it's
you
one
can't get
open
a,
space, then the
Right.
door will count. If
Right.
there's a wall between that door and where the beds are,
well, obviously, that has to be the bedroom egress.
exactly.
And/or the second egress for the building. Is that the intention of the,
We
this?
don't have a new basement plan, so we don't know what's happening down there. Not that
Is
it's.
this something that's really relevant? I mean, I think, nothing, again, the building department will take its position in terms of like reviewing the proper means of egress. And we believe that what we're currently planning is illegal and one to mess up.
I guess the only reason that it's sort of, I mean, I think the only reason why it's applicable is the question of, and believe me, I've done lots of projects where window wells are in the setback, and it's not as if I'm suggesting that they shouldn't be, but I think because of the close proximity of this building, and that the window well is so close to the property line, that it does bring up just a different issue.
I think, as you know, these are the Marcus allows window wells.
In the setback, no, I understand that, I was
think
just saying.
as the Carl Gelman spoke at the Great Force meeting, there's no problem with the concept of hand digging a window well in that kind of
Yeah.
area. And I think the fact that we've gone back to what Carl Gelman initially presented as a more common sense approach to this building, and one which we gravitated towards as well, should be one that I would ask all of you guys to, remind yourselves that what we're proposing here is done all the time, and many of you are part of doing structures in close proximity to other homes, and doing, underpinning exactly like this. It's not a big deal. This whole thing about vibration, I mean, honestly, I've been here 23 years, and this is ranked in the top 5 of obstructionist sort of neighborly things. It's not right what's on the verge here. And so I would ask you guys to really kind of focus on the simplicity of this, what you all know about the soils, about the simple ramping down, about the simple underpinning, the fact that a good general contractor can maintain the exterior, can protect it from inclement weather. And I think Mr. Daly's done this numerous times. He's shown his expertise in working on properties similar to this. Very simple project. What's coming very clear is that, with this fencing and so on, that there's a sort of resentment to anything happening on this property at all. And I think maybe my client would like to say something to that point. But I would just ask that this is getting very complicated, but it's actually very simple. And I think if you guys, if you go back to the simplicity of it, you've got a very easy answer, because it's done all the time.
Thank you. I guess what I was getting at, Luke, was that the window well, hand dug, however it gets in there, is no longer a critical piece of the safety issue. Speaking specifically to one of the objections, because it's not you already have egress with only one bedroom downstairs, correct? So, I never, I
You were
guess.
just saying that maybe you
I mean, the window well is not an issue.
right, you don't need it. If
You don't need it for egress, for safety, for
If you're
anybody to
inside,
get
going
out.
one
You can
door,
go out
yeah.
the door. So, I mean, that
Also
item,
now, I think even in a basement that doesn't have a bedroom, you need to have an egress window to get out.
well, it'd be one big room with one door out. So I think
Well,
the
yeah.
door trumps the window. Anyway, it's
Well,
neither
you
here nor there.
definitely need the window, whether you need the egress through the window or not
No,
is
you
the
need,
question.
or you need a door
Yeah.
or a window.
Yeah.
What is this in this picture? It looks like a little shed that's hanging off the building. Does that exist?
Garbage.
Oh, it's movable garbage. And
All right.
so around the property, you're proposing the one window well on the side and then two sort of metal, non-egress window wells on the back, and then what's the center? What's the center thing on your,
That's an existing here.
yeah,
That's an existing here.
that's, okay, so you're adding two window wells to the rear that are just gonna be little metal, non-egress, that one exists, and then you're adding, and what's the size of the window well that's going on the, I think there's a blow up of it somewhere.
absolutely minimal.
It's-
Were you asking about this, Lisa?
Yeah,
Okay.
but if you look on the site plan, see the plan that shows.
I
these
thought
two
we
are
had a
also
new
window
plan, by
wells.
the way,
Right.
that showed the basement.
No, I don't think they ever submitted a
No?
basement plan.
I'm sorry?
I thought we had a new plan last time. Probably don't, it's not in here. That showed the basement.
Oh, yeah, I thought we did last time.
So this
No?
window well is not dimensioned, but maybe it can get smaller.
What difference does it make? It's not an egress. You don't have to get out and get out of the building that way. It's just to let light in. I don't see that one as an issue.
You mean why they need it?
No, I don't see it as a safety issue. I don't see it, it's to let light into the basement. Why shouldn't you let light into your basement? I mean,
I'm saying it
the
could be-
fundamental
it could be
issue is
smaller if it doesn't have to meet egress, it doesn't have to stick out as far.
on their property. What difference does it make?
Yeah, I don't know, does it matter?
No, I mean.
I just don't see
I
the.
didn't understand what your point was, I guess that's what I'm saying. I thought when you were bringing
Well,
it up.
somebody made the point that the window well egress, when it was 2 bedrooms, was a safety issue. That people couldn't get out, they couldn't get through the 1.5 foot dimension. You know, you had to climb out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not. Doesn't matter anymore if there's stair egress, a door egress. Then it's just for light.
Can I have some clarification as to where this door egress is?
It's under the deck, and it comes out under the porch.
Comes out of the, yeah, comes under the porch. It's
I
out of the-
still understand how the stair is gonna work, but as to Luke's point, it's not really our,
Yeah, the assumption is it has to meet the building code. Not only the assumption, it has to meet the building
Right.
code. So we don't have to get into how the
Right. We
the
just,
stair works. It either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't, you can't build it, and therefore any relief we were to give would be moot. But anyway, that's only one issue.
I'm having a
We
hard time
can't spend.
understanding. I see the plan that shows where the stairs are supposed to be, but it looks like, if I understand it, when you come up those stairs, you're hitting your head on the underside of the
the deck is cut out.
deck.
The deck is
Deck is cut out, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're doing is, it looks like you're coming, well, it looks like in Steve Goins' most recent drawing, that it's L-shaped now, so that you have a longer run, and it could be more of a code stair than it was originally portrayed on Luke's earlier drawings.
what page is that?
And it may function in some respects as egress, but, you know, again, I don't think it's fair to, you know, we're showing 2 potential ways of egress, one window and one door out, and I'm not sure why we're talking about the door.
I think Arthur was just clarifying what it was. I don't know that.
We can. I think we can move off the window well point. You know,
Right.
it's got to meet code. If it doesn't meet code, you know, it's got to be on your property. You know, I don't know how much longer we can spend on that one. So it seems to me to boil down to: are we comfortable, I guess, with the intensification by adding a bedroom, and/or do we think that's within our purview? And then the methodology, which is another issue. Does anybody want to speak about that, or want to vote? Does anybody else in the audience want to speak to this that we haven't heard from yet? No. We heard from, no, I'm kidding, go ahead.
John Brescher for the record. It's not so much that it's the intensification of use as it's a conforming use. Residential use is a conforming use. The intensification comes into whether or not the structure, which is the non-conforming aspect of this property, is intensified. That's what we are discussing more so than the bedrooms or what we're using in that space that's being added. I just wanted to clarify.
Would there be anything that precluded you from going up? I'm just curious. I'm not advocating the plan.
I would imagine, well,
Into the building, probably.
Other than HTC.
other than HGC?
Just the minor
A
thing
small
of the
hurdle.
HTC.
Other than HGC, no, we would be in the same,
Same ZA potential.
Same ZA, and I suppose also if the building were demolished and conformed to setbacks,
You can do whatever you
we
want.
can do whatever we want. As many buildings as the building code would allow us.
Well, there'd be nothing to preclude them from putting a basement under this building.
If it were brand new.
Yeah. Or even as storage, or whatever. I mean, whether or not there's a bedroom down there. I mean, the basement in for storage. Using this method.
Agreed.
So it's,
I'm more concerned with methodology than any other part of this application.
Mhm.
And if I were a neighbor, I would be very interested in making sure that there wasn't any damage to my property, and I think that's our job. And I think that we can require whatever we feel is necessary to ensure that there isn't any damage to any of the neighbors' properties.
I agree with you, Michael. How are you comfortable with the methodology as it was outlined in conjunction with the structural details / drawings?
I am.
Okay. What I would like to do is, I don't like seeing drawings that say not for construction, because then you can do it a different way when they're stamped for construction. So if we were to vote for this, I'd want to make it contingent on the drawings being stamped for construction. Do you want? Should we go through the methodology? I can quickly read it if anybody has an issue with any of them. Protect the common way with the use, or should I not bother?
Well, I think that letter may have to be rewritten to jibe with the engineer's design. So if they're coming back here, I think we should give them an opportunity to make sure that whatever letter is going to accompany the decision
doesn't it
is
do
up to
that?
date.
Yeah,
Protect the common way by use of heavy plating. I assume that's supposed to say plating, not planting. Remove necessary landscape material from the front of the property. Isn't that, this talks about the underpinning.
yeah. This methodology, the new one, Frank had.
Well, assuming that your plan isn't going to change at all from where it is today, and it's going to be the final plan, then I think we can go with this letter.
And remove existing front porch, that's not the whole porch, that was just the bottom portion, is what you said, so that should be updated in the letter.
Right, yeah, this says remove porch and porch roof.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with removing the porch roof. Do you?
No, I guess it's not our purview.
I mean,
but
if they
was just
don't
saying that
remove
he
it-
stated that it was not coming off, and the letter says it is, it's not specific. I'm just trying to make them jive, the testimony in the letter.
Okay.
I think it's better to say that it will be removed, and then if they don't need to remove it,
Yeah, I don't
You
see
know.
that as that big a deal, but we can go either way. Where it says, okay, the underpinning will extend approximately 4 inches inside the existing foundation wall. Okay, I think I understand this now. If there is a footing, I think it probably should say that exceeds that 4 inches, the inside will be saw cut off prior to underpinning to minimize intrusion, because the plans show the existing
Intrusion.
footing there.
It shows it footing being cut.
It does, okay.
Sections do.
I unfortunately couldn't see all the little details. Okay.
So that's what the dotted line is,
It says that portion's been cut.
right?
Got you.
You have to have a 4-inch minimum of bearing. Okay.
Okay, no vibratory seal, no exterior sheet piling. Exterior dimensions of the foundation will remain as they currently are. Arthur, I'm assuming you've seen this. Arthur?
Yes.
So I don't have to read it verbatim. Access to Kite Hill Lane will remain open. I mean, that again is, you don't have the right to ever close off a road, but it's good that it's in there. I think, Frank, if you're, or whomever's doing it, whoever's in charge of the job on a daily basis has to supply their cell phone, not your office number. If there's a construction supervisor, same idea, cell phone. I mean, other than that, incorporating this incorporating the structural plan stamped for construction, limiting it to one bedroom in the basement, which the applicant has came back with.
We don't have any drawing that shows that, we'll just have that.
Yeah, we'd need a new drawing showing the basement plan. And then no further, you'd have to come back anyway, but just explicitly no further relief without coming back to the board. Even if no
further
ZA, no
construction.
nothing. You'd have to come back.
Even if they wanted to, let's say, they could build a second story on a portion of this that's not within the setback, then they wouldn't have to come back.
Well, if we say they do, they do.
No, I'm trying to get you to clarify that. Is it any expansion
I think there was
on the
enough
property?
contention that,
Any expansion of the property would need to come back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you could bump out a word up front that meets zoning,
Mhm.
but it seems to me you're getting relief,
Okay.
so. Is everyone okay with that one?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last one?
No additional work can be done without coming back. Even if it meets zoning.
Well, you can do interior renovations.
Expansion,
Right,
no,
expansion.
Yeah.
no further expansion.
Dates. Are we concerned with the dates?
They have the Memorial Day to, I think that's fine.
That would be part of the decision.
And ground coverage wise, are you guys at your limit, or, can't
We
remember?
have about 30% left, 30 square feet left.
So no, yeah,
Don't
so that would
exceed it, please.
include expansion under the porch, that's there. No further expansion would include any ground coverage expansion, even if the roof is there.
You mean are we going underground? Yeah, no underground.
No. If they want to fill in the porch and that 30 square feet under that existing roof.
Yeah, anything. You want to do
Any
anything
Be out of the
outside?
setback there.
And the structure somewhat exists, so I just wanted to clarify that. So no ground coverage expansion or expansion of any kind.
Okay, and we're all comfortable with the lack of a need for geotechnical engineer, I think.
Yeah, that's okay.
You are?
Well, I agree with Steve. We rarely have them, so I don't know why we would necessarily need it. But with this method, with the underpinning, I think it's a lot safer.
But it would be understood in the decision that if the current engineer feels like he needs some help with this, that he'll call one in. Is that correct?
That would probably be standard.
Yeah, I think. Okay. Then it boils down to a slight, not intensification of use, but intensification of the building, or whatever the heck John said. I don't know. I'm mumbling.
I think she would like to.
Well, I think it boils down to whether or not we're comfortable with the project in this location.
Well, it seems like we've come to the conclusion that we can't vote on the intensification of adding bedrooms, because
Right.
that's not within our purview.
Well, we can,
We can do whatever we want, I guess.
within
Yeah.
reason, but we traditionally certainly haven't.
Right.
If we have a problem with this specific project for some reason, we certainly could.
It's, I'm sort of on the fence, because it's concerning to me that there isn't there is a lot going into this building, but I agree, on the other hand, that I do lots of projects that are like this. They're maybe not as tight a site in such a tight neighborhood, but I don't know that we have the ability to say that you can't have a basement.
Right.
Well, again, we have the ability. It's just whether or not we typically do and should. So, if you feel strongly
Well,
about
this is
it.
different than a lot of things we normally see.
Go ahead, Ellen, maybe.
As the intensification of use, typically you're dealing with a powers test in that situation where you have a pre-existing non-conforming use. This is a conforming use.
Right.
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 I'm simply saying we could
Intensification of
vote
humans
one way.
on a small piece of property, we don't really have a bylaw that allows it. That's
I'm ready to
I
move
am
on.
too.
If anybody wants to make a motion or.
No, I'd just add that, you know, if this were at closer to the setback, we've seen stuff that's a lot closer than this, I have,
I have to.
on this board, so, and in the city, you could have a 30-story building next to a 25-foot hole.
Right, it's just a tiny
Yeah.
lot. Just an unusual condition.
Okay, so was that somebody making a motion? I didn't hear. Susan? Hiram? Michael?
I'll try to do it. So, I'll make a motion to grant the relief as requested with the incorporation of the provided standards.
Methods
Method of construction. That included the limitation and the date?
Yeah, that didn't.
I think we'd have a separate
Yeah.
Okay.
condition about the.
So, the GC and the construction supervisor would provide their cell phone. Structural plans will be included and stamped for construction, limited to 1 bedroom. And no additional expansion without further relief from the board. Did I miss one? I have one that I can't really read.
I think that was pretty much it.
Okay. Any other ones? Did I miss?
No, I think we got it.
Is it wise to include a date where the project has to be started by?
It's 2
When-
years from the issuance. of-
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but we've had a lot of projects come back for emergency permits for the summer because the foundation was in jeopardy. And I'm just, you know,
We're not planning, we won't plan on starting the work until the following fall.
okay.
Okay. Most of those have been like commercial downtown.
No, there's a residence on Main Street.
Okay, I don't remember that. I believe you.
I
Okay,
remember.
so that motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? 4-1. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on. I'm going to be calling Ed Marchand, and hopefully he's still available. Does this phone works, right, Eleanor?
It should.
Do I have it dial 9 or anything?
Harry,
There, do you
6
know?
dial 9.
I have no idea.
Typically, all the dial 9s do require 9.
You do?
Yeah.
It isn't VIP, right?
Oh, yeah. I don't even know what deal
I thought I've used it before. I think you had more sugar in your system.
Internet protocol or something like that.
All I know is it's the digital TV.
All right, I'll try to figure that out.
Want to do it while you're doing everything else?
What? Did you say you thought I could do it?
Michael's going from
He's been on hold for an hour.
What are we doing next? Appleton?
No.
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 The Surfside,
Surfside.
set school view.
Okay.
You sure? I just got a fax.
That's I mean, I can call him on my phone. 1492 Porto? down 9 first to get out? And you don't need to. Okay.
It's ending at 5:08. This is just, I didn't dial 5:08, but it pops up there for some reason.
Did you try not with the 9?
I did not try without the 9.
That extension is not valid.
Okay, let's try mine. Hey Ed, are you there? Sorry, that the first one took a little longer than anticipated, and I can't get the phone to work here, so you're on my cell phone, you put you on speaker, and hopefully it'll work. All right. Can you hear me now? All right.
Maybe he can call you on his phone.
All right, maybe you can call me on, hold on. No, hold on one second.
Well, maybe we can figure out how to get it to
Ed, let me call you back.
What's his phone number?
617.
This is embarrassing. But
You have to press this button now. It's crazy.
I've used it before.
I know.
617?
429. 242.
I'm not saying I'm better at your punching numbers, but.
Oh, well, it looks like it worked, because we're making it
I
5:11.
don't know where you go.
Okay.
It's been beaten out of me. Is it working now?
Yes, Ed, we're gonna put you on speaker, and now we'll figure out how to do that. Hold on one second.
If you hang it up, it goes on speaker, I think.
Speaker first. Speaker. This one?
Yeah, try it.
Ed?
There we go. We just needed Eleanor.
Great.
Okay, now, Ed has suggested I need to open an email if you don't mind. I am doing GDA business.
You wanna identify him for the record?
Yeah, go ahead. Let me open the. Let me get back to square one here. All righty. So we are on. We don't have to do anything about 3215. That's continued. 3415 NHA Properties Inc. DBA Housing Nantucket School View Cottages for the applicant. Go ahead. And Ed, why don't you identify yourself?
Ed Marchand, 40B advisor to the board.
Thank you. All righty. So, Ann, do you want to say anything?
Sure, it's Ann Cuspa, Executive Director at Housing Nantucket. Today I have my lawyer here, Roger Mervis.
Could you guys, we've had people who do watch this, so we wanna have you on the microphone.
Yeah, I got a comment last time that they couldn't hear us. So.
Well, they work now, they didn't work last
The
time.
mics weren't working.
You can use.
But you should go up to the mic, please.
Okay, it's Ann Cuspa, Executive Director at Housing Nantucket. I have Roger Mervis here with me as well.
Great. And Ed, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great. So first of all, just I appreciate the introduction from Ed, and sorry I couldn't join you in the last couple of hearings. But just to review why we're here again today, this is a proposal or an application for a comprehensive permit pursuant to the local initiative program that by virtue of it being a lit project, that means that the project, at least conceptually, is supported by the town, that the project has also received an allocation of Community Preservation Act funds and expects to receive a second allocation of funds in the next year. That this is a proposal to put 4 units on a particular site. We've already approved 2 of those, what I'll call cottages, on the site pursuant to the issuance of a special permit. This summer, we're seeking to have an additional 2 units placed on the site. All 4 units will be for affordable housing purposes. One of the units will be rented by Housing Nantucket for households making under 80% of the median income for Nantucket. The other 3 units will be rented to households making under 100% of the median income for Nantucket. Since the last hearing, Ann in particular, as well as myself, have been working with Eleanor and the 2 Eds to try to incorporate many of the suggestions and recommendations that have already been made to Housing Nantucket, as well as the feedback that it's received from the board and from the abutters. And updated materials have been submitted to the board. Hopefully you've had access to those documents and opportunity to review those. We're continuing to try to be responsive to those concerns. Ed can elaborate on this a little bit, but I spoke to him yesterday, and we went through a list of additional concerns that he has concerning the development, some of which related to Housing Nantucket's decision to borrow approximately, I think it's $120,000. $500,000 from Nantucket Bank to make this project a reality. That's certainly a change from the original proposal, which didn't envision any financing for the project from Nantucket Bank at all. But it's a reflection of how Housing Nantucket has tried to be responsive to the legitimate concerns raised by the board, by abutters, by your consultants, and have taken on some additional commitments already since the initial submission of the application. But many of those additions have required an additional financial commitment. And as a result, Housing Nantucket has a verbal agreement with Nantucket Bank to provide $500,000 of housing for this project. Several of Ed's concerns related to that financing, and we're certainly going to go back to the Nantucket Bank and try to firm up that commitment. But we appreciate the feedback that we've been getting, and our hope is that at the end of the hearing today, that the board will be in a position to authorize Eleanor and your consultants to work with us to put the comprehensive permit into a final form, which the board could take a vote on at its next meeting. So we're interested in trying to address all the remaining issues today. We'll certainly listen to what everybody has to say, and then we want to try to address those and put it into a final form that will be satisfactory to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have some initial questions. Number one, Ann, I thought the number, not that it matters, I just want to get it straight. I thought that the debt was $400.
We have the verbal agreement. Yeah, the verbal agreement is up to $500,000. So as we've just said, Roger just said, we're negotiating still with Nantucket Bank, but the verbal agreement from them is that they would lend us up to $500,000. We're hoping to do less than that. It's a construction loan, so we'll be taking the money as needed, and then once the project is complete, it gets turned into a mortgage.
All right, but just from a, help me out if I'm wrong here, just from a crossing the T's and dotting the I's, the pro forma would want to reflect that, and it doesn't right now, at least the ones I'm looking at. But
well, the number that we gave, the 400, it was 440 or 460? 440. That's what our budget is saying that we'll need to borrow. But, I mean, to me, I would like to have that nod from Nantucket Bank that if we did exceed our costs, we're not going to be flat out, and that we could borrow that extra $60,000 if we needed to.
Well, Ed, should the pro forma be, I think should the pro forma?
I think it would be good to get a realistic pro forma. It's fine to do the 440. I don't think you could put if you put $500,000 in there, there wouldn't be sufficient net operating income to pay that, to service that debt.
Well, but
Because right now, your debt service coverage is basically one. You're generating sufficient net operating income to pay a $440,000 loan. So it seems unlikely. I question whether the bank would make that loan under that coverage ratio, let alone $500,000. So I agree with Ian. It's important to have some cushion there, but I don't know how realistic that is.
But shouldn't the pro forma be as realistic as possible? And if the full 500 is accessed and the project doesn't work financially, I mean, isn't that part of our job to vet this or not?
Yes.
Well, I think it is, but we don't know whether that $500,000 would be necessary. I would argue that in terms of the pro forma, I don't think there was any significant contingency. Given the nature of this project, it seems likely that there are always a few surprises and that there should be a contingency. But if you put the $500,000 in, there's only one conclusion to reach. The project is negative cash flow.
Which would just mean we would have to increase our rents. That's how we would.
Yeah, but you can't increase your rent. Well, you have a small margin to increase your rents and still remain within the 80% and 100% limits. So that's, Dan, you're right. That's what you have to do.
Or cut back
So
on what our expenditures are.
I would rather do that and show what the rents will be and have that extra money built into the project. I think the intent of everyone, the ZBA, the town, and its consultants has been, this is a good project. We just want to make sure it gets the funding necessary to make it a project that can be sustained over the long term.
Yeah, so I think you should include it in a new pro forma, and if it means increasing your rents, or you think you can reduce your expenses somehow.
Well, that's the part. It's like if those are the only two choices, is to either reduce our expenses or increase the rent to make the cash flow work. If we're to reduce our expenses, I think as we've talked about, a lot of these changes that we've had to make have really increased the cost of our project. So, we're promising to, for example, landscaping. We've got a big landscaping plan in place. So if we need to cut our expenses there, then we won't be able to do the landscaping that we're promising.
Well, I understand.
The other alternative is you may need to get or make a request for CPC funds at an amount greater than what you asked for.
I think the bottom line, Ann, is I think the board would be most comfortable with the most realistic pro forma attached to this as possible. And if you've just stated to us you're going to get a $500,000 potential loan, my experience in construction is it's never less than you anticipate. So you need to plan for that. And no, you can't cut the landscaping necessarily. So if the thing doesn't work, then we're back to it's a problem. Now, if you can increase rent and that still works within the framework of the guidelines, I'm not looking for you to increase rent, but you just need to make it work. I mean, I would think you would want to be 100% comfortable that it can work. cash flow
And
wise.
that's why, to me, I was comfortable because we're estimating at 440, and I knew that I had that room from Nantucket Bank. So, you know, I agree with you. A lot of times when you set out on a project, the costs come back higher. So I'm just reluctant to say it's going to cost us 500, and then you start operating like we're going to be borrowing 500, and then, you know, it just like feels like it's constantly going higher than what you budgeted for.
Well, but again, I could budget a project at 200 knowing darn well it was going to cost 300, and what's the point of that? I mean,
We
you know,
think it's
you
going
want...
to cost 440 though.
It's not what, you know, again, you just said you were going to get a loan for 500, so I'm uncomfortable with that. And if you think it's, I guess it's okay. How
But
does
is that
everyone else
okay?
feel?
I mean,
Well-
don't you, doesn't the pro forma have to
I thought-
show what you're, I mean, if you're getting a loan for 500, I think
Let
the,
me jump in here.
Go ahead.
And I discussed this with Roger yesterday. Unfortunately, when you do a 40B, there are a lot of requirements. One of the requirements that's outlined in your project eligibility letter is that you're going to have to get final approval, and final approval is a defined term, at DHCD. Part of that is you're going to have to explain any changes that have occurred since the submission of your project eligibility letter application. On this project, there have been a number of changes that have occurred that are going to result in a better project. You need to explain that. You also have to submit an updated pro forma, which hopefully will get a more careful review from DHCD than perhaps that initial one did. And you're going to have to submit an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, a lottery plan, or whatever you negotiate with DHCD. I'd like to think for a tiny project like this, there's some flexibility. Once they've reviewed all of that, they then execute a regulatory agreement. The regulatory agreement, as I've discussed with the board in the past, is one of the critical control documents in a 40B project. And it spells out, again, what the occupancy requirements are. And for the board at least, the only critical requirement is that at least one of these units, representing 25% of the units, is affordable to a household adjusted for family size of 80% of the median family income. On the other hand, the CPC has made a grant based in the housing trust has made a grant that says, and the other three units have to be affordable at 100%. And that's covered in the deed restriction. My guess is the ZBA will also want to reference 100% because that gives another layer of protection for the town. But basically, DHCD will be issuing that regulatory agreement. And I don't know how familiar, I think Roger's familiar with the final approval requirement. I'm not sure, Ian, how familiar you are with that.
Was that a question?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the regulatory agreement process?
Process, no. The regulatory agreement, yes. I reviewed what DHCD sent me this week.
Okay.
And that, once they say they're ready to sign that, that means you have final approval.
All right, so if I'm hearing you, Ed, we can sort of get off the pro forma issue if, because a revised pro forma ultimately can or should be attached at a later date.
It will have to be submitted as part of the final approval application.
Right, and I mean, I'm just saying.
You're going to want to see the financing commitment too.
Go ahead. Michael O'Mara has a question.
Hi, Ed.
Hi, Michael.
Just want to be clear about this, because it's been a while since I've sat on one of these. But my recollection was that it's incumbent on the zoning board to make sure that this project is economical. Is that correct?
No. The things have changed a bit.
Because, Michael, if you remember, again, with Sachem's Path, where it was donated land, I don't know how many millions was CPC money. So part of our concern was we wanted the project to work financially, at least on the onset, so that town money and town land didn't sort of just dissipate. So I think it's a little bit of the same here. Town money being the CPC funds.
Okay. I'm just concerned because I was looking at a pro forma that was done in May, which shows total debt of $150,000.
Yeah,
And there's a letter that goes with it from Nantucket Bank saying that they will participate up to $150,000. And then it looks like the debt service was paid out over 5 years. After 5 years, there wasn't any debt at all.
Right.
So, and the bottom line, if you go from 150 to 500, then the bottom line doesn't work at all.
The difference, Michael, if I could jump in, is they have set a 5-year amortization period for that loan, which is, as everybody's aware, not very realistic. They've extended the...
Did you say not realistic?
Yeah, but unrealistic.
Sorry?
Yes. Gotcha.
But they've moved off that, Michael.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
They've moved off that. So there's a totally different structure now. The primary source of the funds is $600,000, just $300,000 grant from CPC, plus the $440,000. And it's unclear to me, is there also going to be some equity going into this or is that being completely replaced by the loan?
It's our own equity of $60,000.
Yeah,
80,000, okay.
60,000. That's in the pro forma. Yeah.
Where is
I see
it?
permanent debt at 150,000. Where's the?
Well, you guys are looking at
Looking
an
at an
old
old-
one. Look at
No, I'm looking at the one that's in the package.
you're looking at the old
Yeah.
package.
No, it was in the new package too.
No, I know that, but it was
What
the
page are you
original.
Oh, I see. The
submission.
new one is at 240. I'm looking
Go
at the wrong
further.
one too.
Okay, got it.
I was looking at the right one and then somehow
Okay.
It's actually at 178 is where Ed is.
I'm not sure I'm on the right. I thought I was.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about the comprehensive permit. Sorry. What page
Yeah,
is it on?
it's like 174 shows the permanent debt of 440 on line 100 on page 174. 175 shows the use of funds, how they're going to pay for the construction. And I have a couple other quick questions,
Okay,
and then
nice, yeah.
hopefully we can get off the pro forma thing. You originally were asking for a sewer waiver, sewer permit, or sewer fee waiver. I didn't see that in your draft comprehensive permit because I think you got the notion from us that we didn't feel comfortable with that. So again, getting back to this pro forma idea and making sure that this project is as realistic financially as possible, at least on the drawing board, have you plugged that number back in? Because I didn't see a revised, well, I didn't see it. Let's put it that way. Is that in there?
I do not think so.
I don't, yeah.
That's a good point. My financial manager, Milan, that was here last time, his child unfortunately got sick today, so that's why he's not here. He's out of the office. But I do not recollect that being added. That's a good catch.
All right, because it's not an insignificant fee,
I know.
as you know.
You can grant a waiver from that.
We never
we
have.
will try.
But you
We
are,
would
as
love
the ZBA, as the authority, you,
I understand, but we have not for the other two 40Bs that I sat on, and I don't know why we wouldn't have at Sachem's Path and then turn around and do it here. I mean, I'm just saying. If everybody wants to, that's fine.
Well, that would have been a very different figure, though. How many units?
Well, it's per unit. You really have to think of
Per
it.
unit.
You really have to think of it per unit, nothing else. I mean,
If you were willing to do
And
that,
I
that
don't think you can assume, and this is one of my questions, in the draft comprehensive permit that Roger has submitted, it has a catch-all, and there's no affirmative statement that says, all application fees
Well, I saw that too, Ed, but I think it should be more. What I'm getting, I guess I was speaking a little bit more toward the pro forma and just making sure it's as realistic as possible, because it's not in, that fee, which is how much per unit? Do we know?
I believe it's 8,200.
Yeah, I mean, it's significant. So the pro forma gets that much further out of whack, and again, I'm not necessarily averse to waiving it. It's just we never have.
We
And
could get some participation from the selectmen, too.
yeah, if you want.
Normally CPAs don't take it on their own initiative to waive fees.
I mean,
Normally sort of are instructed to do that by the town in the entity of the Board of Selectmen.
Because, Ann, just a little bit of history. We, I think we talked about this too. On the Abrams Quarry 40B, whether we waived it or inadvertently were not specific about it, the selectmen came back at us years later trying to claw it back. And we, at that point, thought that was unfair to the inhabitants. But I guess what we're saying, I think, is if you want to try to lobby the selectmen or whomever, feel free and get us a letter or something.
Because it increases the town's participation.
When I reviewed this for you on Facebook, I believe what made that less burdensome isn't that payment spread out over a very long period of time?
It can be,
You
yeah.
pay 10% and then the balance over a number of years?
Yeah, you're right, Ed. I think, and it may even be 20 years or 10 years,
Right.
and there's
So
no
when I took a
interest.
look at the actual impact on the project that takes its path, I understood better why they didn't put a big argument on that point. And of course, that was a for sale project, so the burden on the homeowners anyways. But I think someone should do the numbers and see what impact that really has on the pro forma. But again, there's no question of it. You need to have an accurate pro forma. I don't think anybody can or should question that.
Right, I agree. So that was another thing that I saw in the pro forma that was questionable. The other items that jumped out at me, which we talked about, I believe, last time, and Ed, I think you had some question about the reserve, but Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, you have in your operating expense of $37,000 total, I think $5,000 in yearly maintenance. So that's for all 4 units, just stuff, correct?
Yep.
And then an additional, which isn't a huge amount, $2,000 that would be more of a sinking fund, so that when the roof goes, when there's some more significant expense, you will have money in the bank.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So are we comfortable with that? Basically, in essence, you could look at it $7,000 a year of maintenance, building maintenance, landscaping, etc., were itemized elsewhere as part of that $37,000. I can't remember the
Does
page.
that,
All 4 units.
that accrues, I assume, if, like in the first year, your expenses are significantly less, you're putting the same amount in every year.
Well, my guess is, Michael, that the $2,000
Well, yeah,
accrues,
that's
but not,
accruing, yeah.
if you don't spend the $5,000, I suspect it gets spent somehow. I don't know how
Well, I would argue that one of the conditions of this should be, given that I think it is tight,
It is.
that if cash flow is generated, it should be allocated towards a reserve.
Okay, so excess,
Because the reserves are, especially, it's one thing if it's all new construction. Then you get a little grace period on a new construction project for the first, 5 or 10 years actually, if it's built correctly. But given this is a park renovation project, it would be great. I think everybody would feel more comfortable if there could be a funded reserve. However, given the debt service coverage or the possibility of going to a $500,000 loan, I don't think there's going to be much surplus cash flow generated here.
well, but what you're saying is out of that, let's say yearly maintenance is not $5,000. 1 year it turns out to be $3,500 because everything works perfectly and no one needs anything other than a little paint here or there. That excess $1,500 could indeed go to the reserve fund.
To the replacement reserve fund.
But the reality is that will probably get used somewhere, whether it's allocated one way or the other. So,
Right.
I mean,
we know that a couple of the roofs are not going to be replaced, and it's just a question of time when you're going to need to replace those roofs. And replacement reserves are never adequate. Most things require $250 per unit. If you put a real number in there, it would just make most projects uneconomic.
okay.
So you put in a little and you hope for the best.
All right, again, I'm relatively comfortable with the 2,000. It's not generous, but hopefully nothing happens for 5 years. You get 10,000, and if not, you'd have to fundraise or CPC it or whatever. Another question came up, and how and you do not pay real estate taxes because they're not in the pro forma. That's a yes, you don't pay, or
No.
because you don't like it,
I
or
think
it's a protest?
The intention is for Housing Nantucket to sit down with the assessor and work out whether it be through an abatement or a payment of lieu taxes, pay something there. So the intention is to plug a number in there.
All right, but it's not in there now.
I
One
understand.
more issue with the pro forma. I mean, I think we want the pro forma to include whether it's payment in. I don't think you're exempt from paying real estate taxes.
We're not making that argument.
Okay. Do you pay real estate taxes on your other properties? Ann?
No.
How? Why? You're not educational. You're not charitable. And I can't remember the third.
I don't know why. We don't know.
Interesting. I would put it in the pro forma. It's probably, yeah, I mean, I'm not, whatever, but, okay. Were there any other sort of pro forma questions anybody had?
So did we leave that we think that they should be putting in the larger, should they be keeping it at 440, as long as they can make it work?
I think the pro forma should be as accurate in a worst-case scenario as possible,
Yeah, I think if it's a $500,000 construction loan, $500,000 should be on the pro forma,
So
for
do I.
sure.
So then you can adjust the rents to make the numbers work. And then, I guess in the off chance that they don't borrow that much money and they've already raised the rents,
Well, I would assume you would lower the rent.
Right.
you would lower the rent.
Yeah,
No?
you can always go lower or take less, but
You can always lower the rent. You might not want to, but you could if you want.
Would they have to?
no.
Would they be making too much profit? No, so.
No. They're never,
The requirement is to make it affordable at 80 and 100%. And Ian gave us the schedule. If you take a look at that table, which I think is a really good summary of the project,
which table,
it
Ed?
included.
This one, I
Does
think.
everybody have that table?
Yeah, I have it. Okay, go ahead.
If you take a look at the last column, Ian added a column that shows what the maximum allowable rent
This one right
would
there.
be under the 80% or 100%
So
guideline.
they have a lot of,
So there's not a lot of room, because
you include the utility.
you can't compare it. You have to do the sum of the rent that's paid by the tenant plus that utility allowance.
Got it.
So for example, on a 2-bedroom unit, it's $2,100. And so the difference, the
2245.
unit.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me.
It's 2245, so it's about 150 for that unit, and it's about $195 for the Unit B and 96. So there's not a lot of wiggle room.
So if you take that times 12 and divide it by your annual cost, that's
Well,
more.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So moving off the pro forma, we think.
Can I'm sorry to
Go ahead.
just interrupt.
Not at all.
Again, really, especially when we got Ed on the phone, I think our intention, again, is to be talking to Nantucket Bank to firm up a lot of these issues, which need to be discussed with them, to put together an updated pro forma, share it with Ed and Eleanor, and to come up with something that is satisfactory. And our hope is, to do this in the interim period between now and the next meeting, so that everybody will be satisfied and ready to take a vote at the next meeting.
Well, I think that's a great plan. I think that maybe I can speak for the board here. We're behind the project. We support the project. We just want to make sure it works before we put our names on it, and we want it to be a success. When you talk about the landscaping and how it's costing extra money, well, I mean, it's the face of the project when you drive by. So, we want it to be a success for the town and for you, and I'm sure you do too.
If
So,
it's voted into the comprehensive permit, you can't not do it, correct?
if it's voted in, yeah, you have to
You
do
have to
these
do it. So
things.
it's not like you can cut back someplace if you've decided that you've gone over budget. If we've.
So we would just like everybody to be comfortable before we sign our names to it that you included, that the finances work. And
Might not be the appropriate time to bring this up at minutes.
well, let's
Deal with that at the end of the
see what goes on if it needs to be. Go ahead, Michael.
Have all the buildings been identified?
So-
All right. I'm just going to go through them one by one. Okay, so
Well, I want to, it's a yes or no answer, it's fine with me.
it's hard to answer that question because
That's
for
a no.
Well, Unit B is new construction. Have we been to HDC? No. We are notifying and have talked to DHCD about whether a new construction is okay, which you suggested that we did last time. DHCD doesn't have a problem with it. The other one was CPC. So I reached out to them, verbally got an indication that it would be okay because our grant language did cover, it said primarily through house recycling, but they need a meeting next week just to confirm that it's okay that we do a new build. So, yes, verbally everybody's saying it's okay, but we still have to go through a couple more hurdles to know for sure. The 5 Loretta building, Unit A, he has a timeline. So again, we're trying to work with a donor's timeline. He wants the building moved in the spring. So that's why Roger's kind of encouraging you to let's iron all this stuff out in December so that in January we'll be able to get the building that we want moved, that we've done all our pro formas on, and we've gotten our construction bids on this building and the changes that have already been through HDC. So if everything moves smoothly, we'll get that building. But if we get derailed and we can't do construction till after September, then we don't have a building for that spot.
Okay. So your, under use of funds, your construction costs, does that anticipate a new building from scratch?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that figure today?
Well, we're getting a couple of different estimates. I've gotten one so far, and that estimate was it was 100 and should I tell you what it's
Sure.
Okay, but yes, it's incorporated and reasonable within our pro forma.
Okay.
So it's listed on the use of funds sheet?
I don't have it in front of me, but that sounds appropriate.
Well, I think it's mixed into
mixed in,
right.
It's mixed into there. It's not specific.
It's not specific for the new build.
It's not.
Thank
It's
you.
not.
It's not
yeah.
a line item,
Modular.
one line item.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, I think we're on the same page, Ann and Roger, trying to get this to the end date. But we have to do it properly. We're not just going to be rushing into it. So, well, let's keep working through this, and maybe we can get to a point where there are only a few things that need to be done. The new pro forma, it seems that Ed Pesci had several comments about, and we just got that, I think, today. It was dated December 8th, so it's hard for us to react to that, obviously. It was an email that I'm happy to let you read if you'd like to read it.
I can look at it
One of the things he mentioned was the landscaping plan, and we did, at your suggestion, get a CAD version of the plan rather than the illustration. I have that here I can hand out.
I think we have a copy.
Okay. I don't think it has the fence, which was one of his comments, along the Ryder property, and this one does.
Okay.
So I can give that to you, and then
Sure.
I also took a bunch of pictures of the site if you wanted to take
Sure.
a look at those too. And
I think the important thing is, again, just getting to the next step, which is the documentation. We should look at it, but if you're telling us it's on
Thanks.
it, will become part of the plan, the comprehensive permit.
Which is
So
fine.
if you've taken Ed's comments into account, he had some drainage comments.
That we haven't addressed yet.
Right. So I'm saying, if you want the comprehensive permit to be signed in January, a lot of the burden's on you.
Right.
And
Understood.
giving us the information on January 9th for a January 10th meeting is difficult for us and Ed Pesci, anybody who has to review it. And I know it's Christmas, so I don't want to get your Christmas hopes up. It might not happen in January because I know I'm going away, blah, blah, blah. So it's just, we're trying to work with you on this.
I just say, we did, we, like you, just got the letter from Ed Pesci this morning, but we thought that many of his suggestions were good and are going to incorporate it. He suggested the soil testing. That he said specifically, just make that a condition of the comprehensive permit. That's perfectly fine with us. So I mean that.
Right. Well, that's
can be
all
dealt
I'm
with
saying.
easily within the context.
It just needs to be part of the deal.
His suggestions in terms of egress with a line, a stop sign, etc., they all seem like sensible ideas. So that's exactly what our intention is. That's what I meant when I said about between now and the next meeting, working with your consultant, Mr. Eleanor, to incorporate those, to make commitments, and incorporate those in a hopefully final version of a comprehensive permit. We will commit to doing many, if not all, of those things that have been recommended.
Okay, well, that's great. So we don't have to talk about Ed's letter unless anybody wants to speak to a specific point on it. He had drainage issues, some signage issues. I can't remember, but Roger just alluded to them. But basically, you said you agreed that all of them were good suggestions and would incorporate them.
Exactly.
Okay, so they need to be incorporated on a plan. So just so that they're there, part of the comprehensive permit. Okay, let me just look at these various notes I have. Architectural plans for all buildings. Ed, do you want to speak to your notes, your list? We talked about site engineering, I believe.
We did number 2. The only thing I'd add is, I think the board would like to see trash barrel enclosures indicated in some manner to make sure those actually happen. Number 3, the architectural plans. Does Ed reviews architectural plans? Does Ed review architectural plans?
No. I would say no.
Okay.
I mean, the HTC would review the architectural plans, which the applicants agreed to, so I don't.
So that should be fine.
I think that's fine.
Okay. The number 4 on my list was expanded outline specifications. Roger has a good start at that in the comprehensive permit. I would suggest, Roger, we just pull that out and do it as an exhibit. And I'll probably discuss with you a few more items that would be worth including
right, Ed, can I comment on that briefly? You in one of your notes talked about sheathing, insulation, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, my personal feeling on that is those are code requirements. And as long as they meet the code, which they have to, I don't see the need to call all that information out.
That's fine.
I mean, unless it's going to be above and beyond the code, and you want to specifically note that, Ann, which I doubt. So I didn't see the need to. I can see it on the sort of the fixtures, the finishes, just so that the appliance list. That more of the specifications of what you see in the house and the guts. Okay, so we'll move off that one. What about
number 5? I think just HDC approval.
right? 6.
Number 6 you've discussed already. Number 7, the waivers. That no boards accept the general waiver anymore for 40 Bs. So I think, Roger, that's going to have to be more specific.
Yeah, I didn't like that language either, and that we so.
The first one, the list that was submitted with the panel, I believe, or possibly with the comprehensive permit application, was more specific. So I just think that needs to be clarified. We've discussed the DHCD final approval. And yet normally, no construction can occur until you receive final approval. With this project, given the need possibly, I mean, you just need to work hard to get final approval. And hopefully you'll be able to get that before you have to move that house.
Okay. I had a couple. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want a clarification of the market process. I actually had a chance to speak with Andrew Forrest this morning, and we discussed monitoring, and I'm going to have a follow-up conversation with them. And Judy Barrett is doing some work for the town, and also Alana Quirk from Compliment and Page. Technically, if it's a DHCD project, DHCD will be monitoring the eligibility of the residents. I need to check to see how DHCD actually does that. But I think that's something that I can discuss with Roger and Ann and report back to the board at the next hearing.
Yeah, that works for me. That seems to be nitty gritty that we're not necessarily going to even understand. I had a couple other comprehensive permit language issues, and we talked about this, but I didn't see them in the draft. No occupancy of the units until they're all finished, and unless again, does everybody agree with that?
100%.
I think we talked about that,
Yeah.
yeah, because too small.
It's just too small, and they all need, obviously need COs before any occupancy. No.
Can you speak on that for 1 second?
Sure.
It's my understanding that there'll be different contractors, perhaps on all 4 of these units. Given that, and given the fact that to my knowledge, there's no requirement that there be a clerk of the works per se, who is going to be overseeing the entire project?
I would assume Ann, but Ann?
Well, I was thinking that was the answer, but not that she's not qualified to do what she's doing, but on a construction basis, I'm thinking, who is that person that oversees the entire project?
We have a general contractor.
Who's going to do all 4 buildings?
Yeah, we certainly have one right now secured for the 2 buildings that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2 buildings, like I said, we're getting other estimates to make sure that price to build new, if if they come in much lower, or if we kind of evaluate that we want to switch GCs, it might be a different GC. I don't want to lock ourselves into this one GC that we're using right now, but that's
Normally, there would be one person paid by the applicant who oversees everything, just doesn't necessarily even show up every day, once a week, and checks construction, checks the technique, and looks over the builder's shoulder, but doesn't get in the way.
So you're saying like an owner's agent?
Yes.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
We have a GC.
I understand.
Yeah, that's it.
Are you suggesting you want that, Michael?
Well,
I
I'm
mean-
suggesting that normally you would have one.
Well, I know, for instance, there was no clerk of the works at Satcham's Path.
We had an engineer, there is an engineer that reviews each building.
That's not how I remember it,
Yeah.
but I remember there's an engineer that certainly looks at infrastructure progress and whatnot, but anyway, I don't remember that, but do we need to
Well, I'll
burden
I
the
guess
project
it all
with it?
depends on what happens with the contractor. I mean, if he ends up
Yeah.
doing all 4 buildings, then it's a non-issue.
Well, it's incumbent on the owner, if you will, to, I mean, they're the ultimate
Executing.
clerk of the works,
Right,
if you will,
they
and
should.
it's
But
whether or not we want another layer.
I'm curious to see what Ed thinks about this.
Ed?
Well, you have to monitor construction to make sure you're getting what it's paid for. And, the owner can do it if it has the experience and expertise to do that. The building inspector obviously comes out there for the inspections, but it's not uncommon for owners to have a third party do the inspection.
May I mention, don't forget that I'm just the executive director. I have a 11-member board of directors who's behind me, one of whom is a builder, and we've got tradespeople on there. So every month I'm reporting back about this project. We also have a construction subcommittee. So it's not just me. You might just be seeing my face, but there's a lot more interaction with the GC than just me.
Okay.
That's good to
I mean,
know.
in most jobs today,
I'm comfortable
well,
with it.
for larger jobs, there's a state requirement that's known as controlled construction, where the architect has to inspect the project and submit certification, I think, at least monthly. Will the architect have any ongoing role in terms of inspecting the work? Because that's the other way you can do this, Michael.
I'm not sure that there's a lead architect on this
Well,
project.
Well, there is.
There
It's
is.
Ethan Griffin from Chip Webster.
His fee
His
is
fee is fairly nominal, so I assume he's not,
been hired to continue.
his participation.
We haven't talked about that. So,
Why don't, maybe we could leave this at, or if it's okay with you, Michael, that, and you give it some thought if you're, and make sure you're comfortable, because there is something to be said for experience when you go on a job and see somebody tells you something is done, but it's really only, or finished, and really only 95% or 98% is finished, and that 2% is the thing that leaks, or whatever, or people move in and it's just not complete. And so you might want to talk to your board, maybe the clerk of the works could be a volunteer position, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Yeah.
I would say that this would be penny wise and pound foolish not to have somebody who doesn't have any liability per se, but who knows what they're talking about. They're licensed, and they're taking just a good look at how things are done.
Yeah, if you have a builder on the board,
we
maybe
do.
he can do that.
Bob
for you.
Little's on our board. He's a volunteer board member, and he's familiar with the project. If there was some kind of, I could ask him if he would be willing to submit something, whatever you are saying that you would need to know that he was involved with the project, and maybe some clear expectations of ours to ask Bob, would you be willing to give this? That would be helpful.
That'd be fine with me. I would say that
Do we want to do that, though?
Typically, a pro bono job like that is not what I would want to do if I were in a
Huh?
nonprofit. And I was the chairman of Nantucket Ice, and we had one, the entire project that we paid. And he paid for himself several times over.
Do we have any sort of clerk of the work? Well, not we. Did the Sachem's have anything like that? Did we insist on anything like that? I don't remember it.
I wasn't there in the original, and I don't recall seeing that in the original comp permit. I mean, you know, Ed is out there on a regular basis. We had construction meetings until they pulled building permits on a regular basis to discuss the installation of the infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't remember it, Michael. I remember the infrastructure.
I remember it for infrastructure, but not for vertical.
Yeah, no, I do
I'm
know
not so
that
sure we should require something. Isn't
Yeah.
it just a good idea?
and there
for
is
them?
someone,
I mean-
J.P. Scanlon's there all the time. So.
There's a difference
It-
between
Yeah.
having a board being reported, but being on the receiving end and having that information come to you. It's a totally different thing when you actually are visually seeing everything in person, so you can kind of. I think that's your point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt that there's, in my mind, that there is benefit, but I'm not sure that, I mean, we could hang our hat on requiring it vis-a-vis the fact that the town is so big a participant in this, but again, we did not do it at Station Path, which is 40-some-odd units.
Right.
So,
I'm less worried about that. I think it's a good idea that they have somebody just to make their lives easier, but I'm not so sure we should require it.
Yeah,
It's
and what I
small
was saying,
buildings.
I was saying, should we do that? Was was I understanding that you were asking us to come up with requirements for him? Because we,
If you were to require that, I would want to know what I'm asking my board member to do. That's what I meant.
well, I think, Ann, what we're suggesting, however you get to that, whether it's paid, whether it's volunteered, whether it doesn't happen at all, I think it's going to behoove you to have somebody who is knowledgeable about construction and methodology, et cetera, besides the GC, to look at it. It's not a requirement. I
don't think we should require it.
find it hard to require it. I mean, on
wouldn't
any,
require it personally, I just think it's smart to have some oversight.
The way I understand it right now, if you go forward and you build from the ground up on one building, you're going to have a 1-year warranty on one building. That's it. So it's, I recommend it highly.
I would agree with that it's a recommendation, and
again, with you.
as Michael said, that position normally pays for itself. You know, if that inspector comes up with, or clerk of the works comes up with one or two things, you know, every visit really pays for itself.
Okay, but we're leaving it as a recommendation at this point.
That's fine.
Okay. The only other thing I saw on any of my notes or lists was no dogs. We talked about that, right?
yeah, it's in the lease.
It's in the lease. Sorry.
No dogs, there's a thing about having dogs.
Oh, you can have the pet sorry,
I thought
no
we
dogs
specifically
unless
talked
there's.
about on this tiny site
Those mentioned.
because there were mentioned from neighbors barking dogs all day. They're left there. It's a tiny site. The density is increased. I thought we said no dogs.
Oh, I thought we said no. I thought we said that there was if you had like a pet approval policy or something like it.
If I could just, I don't mean to interrupt.
That's fine.
Just, first of all, we have a pet policy in place that we can share with you, which I think
it's in the
It's in the
packet.
is what you're referencing.
Yeah.
That may or may not be satisfactory to butters, but I guess there's a second point I want to make, which is if it turns out that any of these tenants are disabled and require pets, then it gets into a really sticky situation for us. because we're really caught between a rock and a hard place
I think
there.
that's a different situation, though.
You're
If someone
talking
has a
about
Well,
service
Ann
animal.
specifically said in a note to Ed, these are not ADA, or ADA, whatever.
ADA
It
units.
doesn't have anything to do with
units.
the ADA compliant building. It has to do with the individual situation for the tenant. If, for instance, you have somebody blind, that one's obvious, you know, they would have a right to a seeing-eye dog. If you had somebody who developed anxiety, stress, was established as being disabled under applicable law, they have a right to request a reasonable accommodation. And we probably would have a requirement to allow them to have a pet, presumably a dog, as an emotional support animal.
Yeah.
And if we didn't do that, then that creates real legal challenges for us, potential financial liability.
I think that's
I
fine.
think what we said was,
Dogs are allowed?
Well, no, under that policy.
Yeah.
yeah. I
But
mean,
the-
it's not- if-
But does I have to admit to not reading the pet policy, but is it specific, you can have a pet if you
can have
need
up
it?
to 2.
You can have
No,
up to
that-
2.
The pet policy is not specific to disabled individuals. It allows everybody, but then requires the pets be, of course, inoculated, not create disturbances or noise, not create health hazards, etc. It gets incorporated into the deed, and it's a basis for eviction if someone doesn't comply.
I think
with that policy.
Why not just, just my thought is you get a tiny site, you get 4 buildings, you get 8 dogs running around pooping. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I think
Talk
what-
about a health hazard. I just,
You have your notes?
my notes say that we, there had to be some kind of dog policy, but that we were talking about the outdoor space, like limiting the dog, like the dogs weren't going to be able to have just free reign. They couldn't be like unleashed, and then like Ed said, I feel like we said something like limiting dogs, right? So that it wasn't like if every unit had a dog or had 2, you could have 8 dogs.
That's my recollection.
Right, and so were we going to limit it to 1 unit?
yes, please.
Is there any number of multifamily rental properties that do not allow pets?
Yeah.
I agree with Roger. I think the policy could be no pets unless there's a documented ADA sort of substantiation
I agree.
for a pet. I don't think you can avoid that. I think it's like
No, absolutely not. We're not trying.
But you can clearly say no pets.
Okay.
I think that would be hard, though, to do no pets across the whole thing. I don't know.
Why?
Why?
Because there are a lot of people that have animals. here. Well, it's
But
kind of
these are
weird.
rental units. It's not like
They can make a choice between getting an affordable unit.
right
That's true, and getting rid of
and
the
having a
dog.
pet.
Yeah, or go pay
But
market
getting rid
rate.
of the dog,
And you
or,
can- and-
I mean, that's a choice.
I agree with you,
Well,
Ed.
I heard a couple of things. One, I heard a reference to 8 pets.
Well,
So
what about a reduction?
certainly one thing we could do is limit it to 1 pet per household. Another thing we could do is, if you're worried about pets being off leash, make it clear that you have to have the pet on the leash.
No,
I'm
not
I've been
gonna vote
involved in
for
a
it. I'm
project,
just
but
letting you
wait,
know.
I've been involved in a project before
Okay,
where
so
we
we
did.
can get
yeah, I
off
would
it.
say no pets because I was in one before with multi-units and people having pets, and it was a constant nightmare for us. And trying to police it with the lease
Right.
and who has a pet and who's got it on
Right.
leash and this and that. It was a nightmare. So
I mean, was
If-
Marcus going to go over there and police the dog leash law? I don't think so. So
yeah, I would say you're better off to say no pets unless of course there's
Yeah.
an ADA issue or
Ann, do you
a
have a
service
problem
dog.
with the dog thing?
Well, I'll just tell you, from a personal standpoint, I think that if I was moving into a rental and I had to get rid of my cat, I mean, I know that, or a dog, it just seems like the safe harbor for animals, they say that they have this problem where they're constantly getting animals dropped off because there's no pet policies.
Right, because
so I
people-
feel bad about that,
Yeah.
but if you are mandating that that's part of our comp permit and I don't have any control over that, then I'm willing to give that up to you.
I agree with Ed that it's a choice to have the pet versus the housing. I also think when you're a renter on Nantucket, to have a pet puts you in there's a smaller market for apartments. I mean, bringing a pet into, it's not a right to have a pet. And they do cause more damage or wear and
Okay.
tear.
Are we good with no pets?
Yes.
Unless it's a service dog.
Right, yeah, of course, of
Of
course.
course, that's a given.
Yeah.
If you need the pet for your emotional support, more power to you. Is there anything else that we want to go over before I go to the audience? Because I do see some people that have commented before. I want to get to them. Why doesn't anybody think about that, and I'll go to the audience. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak about this? Please, just come down to the mic and identify yourself, please. Go ahead.
How you doing, Cliff Williams? I just had a question on the structure. We talked about there was only one new structure, but I've seen the existing structure that was moved, and then it seems to have been demoed like 90%. Wouldn't that have to now qualify as a new structure under the building code?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, within reason, but that I'm going to let Ann speak to that.
You mean it was demoed to repair rod and things like that? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Well, we'd have to meet the 8th edition code. I noticed that the walls are 2x4s, so I'm just wondering how it's going to meet that code.
It's a fair question, but again, I don't think it's our purview, building code. It's a fair question, Ann. That this might be where somebody who has a little more experience in this would be helpful.
Right. We just talked about that, and there's a situation where I don't know who's issued a permit to build when it's 2x4s and has to meet the 8th edition. It doesn't make any sense.
What Cliff is referring to, are you clear what he's talking about?
I missed the first part of the thing, so I was getting my phone back. I got distracted. I didn't understand.
The building that you moved, and then it turns out that for various reasons, Cliff, I don't think the intention was to full demo it,
No.
but as often happens with a moved building, we've had this discussion, it turns out to be a full demo. You leave a little plywood and some studs, but by virtue of the extent of the work you did, you've well exceeded, I'm sure, the threshold that would mean you are now need to meet the newest building code. So you might want to check into that before you get too far down the road. I mean, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. Cliff does.
Yeah, and I mean, my question would be, if someone's building, someone issued a permit, and how would they do that if just by my great experience?
Well, the permit was probably issued.
The permit would have been issued using an energy calc. We have to do energy calculations for any building that's going to be moved or renovated, and it was probably based on, usually if it's a renovation, I mean, I don't know how Steve reviewed it, frankly, or what was put
We
in.
don't know the answer to that, Cliff, but it's a valid point, and but it's not really for us.
No, but it's just part of the conversation
Yeah.
we just had on the expense and unforeseen
Absolutely.
consequences.
No, and it speaks to having somebody oversee what's happening so that you don't go too far down and then have to.
Yeah, there may
fix
be
something out to
ways
make
to
it- to fix it.
get to where you need to get to, and it may not even be an issue.
It might
I
not
don't
be an
know.
issue, because when
Okay.
Ethan did his permit application, I'm assuming he put it together, he had to do an energy calculation based on what was proposed for the site, and it should reflect certain installation values, which will meet whatever he needed to for code.
So just offhand, I mean, she referenced to it that there was only one building that was new construction, but that would now mean two new construction.
Right, so does that change, so that's a good point, so does that change what she needs to say to the state of what has changed since the first letter was
I think
issued?
what I suggested last time was simply that because the plan changed from when Housing Nantucket started this whole process, the language does specifically say primarily recycling, but I would maybe cross that T and dot the I, and do you, from a neighbor or town or whatever, have an objection to new? I mean, is there something we should be concerned about other than the T's and the I's being taken care of?
I guess I could be just called a concerned citizen, but then I also have certain issues with the building department on what they consider to be new construction, old construction.
I don't think we're taking that one on.
No, but I'm just trying to get clarity. I drive by and I see 2x4 structure and it's got a permit, I'm thinking, well,
I think you
know
want to
can't
speak
build
to
with
somebody
2x4s.
else than us on that one.
Exactly.
And
but-
it is possible
It is, you can.
that they're gonna fur out those walls.
Right.
Yeah, there's
we
many
don't
ways
know.
you can get to the right.
Structurally, you can build a 2x4 wall, it's an
Right.
insulation issue. So you just
Yeah.
have to use different insulation to meet the energy code.
Just keep it in mind.
Okay.
But I think just because there were 2 or 3 or more organizations that gave their approval based on your plan of recycling buildings, doesn't, for I think good reason, that may not be the best, on every building. You might want to just make
Can
sure,
I ask a
which you
question?
said you were.
Right. Have
So-
they ripped down a lot of this building? I
Yeah.
haven't gone past it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so there's nothing left of it, I mean,
Well, I mean, the walls up to 4 feet were ripped down.
because they had rot.
No,
Or-
because it was on a slab.
It was on a
foundation,
slab.
It needs to get moved, so
Oh.
we had like demo up to 3 feet.
It's really not a ZBA point. I mean, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Well, it was deferred to the last,
The intent was to
relocate structure,
again, I don't want to bog down too much on it.
It's a building department issue,
The only
but
thing
it's,
that I think is relevant
right.
is if they had a clerk of the works, this may not, you might not have seen what you saw.
You would
Right.
see exactly what you saw. It's just
Yeah.
at some later
Yeah.
date, you would have to take the remedial step to make sure the proper insulation was in there. So nothing would have changed.
Well, I think it goes to Michael's point that overall guidance would be a good thing because you create these situations where all of a sudden you just went from
Right.
a renovation to a new building.
right, what would change was we would have had an answer for your question.
All right, but again, I think we're straying from the 40B application and what we can and can't or should and shouldn't be talking about. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said, but we talked about this issue last time when Ann made it apparent to us that things had changed. The building wasn't in as good shape or wasn't really worthy of being moved. We suggested she goes to the various entities that gave money, permission, et cetera, and she's doing that. So I think from this application standpoint, we've covered this point. From the building department, Cliff, you got a problem, you could talk to Steve. I mean,
I always talk to him. Doesn't do very much good, but.
Okay,
All
so
right, thank you.
who's next? Go ahead. Just identify yourself, please.
Hi, Vicki Ryder. I live at 11 Surfside Road. My 2 biggest concerns, which you kind of discussed today, was the fence and the dogs. So I'm happy that there's not going to be dogs because it will be a nightmare. The fence, how tall is the fence going to be?
The fence is, as I understand it, is 6 feet tall. 5 feet of it is solid. 1 foot of it is lattice, which is the HTC's fence du jour.
So the whole height
Would
of
be
the
6.
fence is only going to be 6?
Yeah, that is a limitation not put on by the ZBA, but typically by the HTC.
Okay, I'm hoping that's enough, because I was told that.
That's all that's allowed.
Okay, because I talked to an architect, and he said an 8-foot fence is allowed in my.
I have never
But I
in
don't know
30
if
years,
that's true.
37 years,
Okay,
Terry has never
okay.
seen it. All those meetings, taking notes.
That's fine, I have no idea,
Okay.
that's not my, so it would be a 6-foot fence.
Correct.
And
Okay.
also privet and some other screening.
Um,
shows.
The other thing, any of these other houses that are going in, are they going to have basements? Because I know the one that they relocated, they put a basement in.
The-
Like,
The intention is that all 4 will have basements.
okay, because my concern is, like I said, they have basically killed my Leyland cypress trees because of those plates they put into the ground. I talked to 3 landscapers, and they saw the property line, and even if I was Ann and I was doing the project, it's so close to my property line, you can't, roots are going to grow up to a certain point because everything was so close, it might as well just about been on my property line. So my trees, I have to take all those trees down because you could see they're dying now. And all three of these experts said those trees are not going to make it because they severed the roots when they put those plates in. So I guess I'm trying to get, like, I need to know, like, it's a definite on the fence, and when would the fence, like, when would they be putting the fence in? Because I have to coordinate when my trees come down, the fence goes up, and then I'm going to have to replace all my trees because they killed my trees.
The fence didn't show up on this.
The fence didn't show up on the plan, and that was one of Ed's concerns.
And that was just a mistake of the engineer.
Right.
We told them to put it in there and have a plan that has a fence.
So, in terms, go ahead, Ann, you want to answer that question about when and where and
Because
how?
I don't want to put new trees in and have this problem after I put my new trees in. I'll wait until, I don't know if they're going to be putting more of those barriers along, you know, my trees again, which they very well may be.
It'll be before occupancy.
I mean, the fence happens at the end.
Yeah,
So-
before occupancy, though.
So that would be when the whole project's done?
Yes.
Right.
Now, having said that, if you want to work together to get rid of the Leland cypresses, which probably preclude anybody from putting the fence in right now within reason, maybe the fence could go in earlier to give you some privacy. It does not have to go in at the end, does it?
That way I can put my new trees in.
Right, but again,
But I'd rather see the fence go in first and then put my new trees on, you know.
Well,
go ahead.
I understand, and I heard from the beginning, since we've been talking about this, it's really important to make you have the fence. I hear that. I don't think we're killing the trees. I took a bunch of pictures there just yesterday. I'm looking through them again. There's a couple dead branches, but all the trees are still alive.
We don't have to get, let's just take a time out. We do not have to get into the tree health, okay? They're within their rights to excavate on their property, drive sheet piling, do whatever
I'm
they
not a tree expert. Until this project went in, those trees were in for 16 years. Not a problem.
You are within, excuse me, I don't want to interrupt, I do want to interrupt for a second. You are within your rights to prune those trees back on their lot line in a straight line up, which would do nothing for the trees. So unfortunately, the trees are very large. They've been growing for 16 years. Their roots are well into the neighboring property. And it does not sound to me like anything was done that was not within their rights as a property owner.
But she never came to me to say, this is quick, could you please? I had no idea. You're only supposed to cut them in the fall. And I would have had them professionally cut, but they just cut them. And you can't just cut the sides of a Leyland cypress tree. Not just anybody, and their workers did it. They just...
That probably was not the most sensitive use of, or not as neighborly as you could have been. I agree.
I would have done it, but she never. They just did whatever they wanted.
Okay,
So, like
that's
I
fair.
said,
Your complaint is a fair one, but what would you like from us?
As long as I get the fence, that's all. And it's
The
not going to be cheap. It's going to be $2,000 or $3,000 just to have them taken down, and then I got to buy all new trees.
The fence is part of the plan. I don't know what else to say. The fence it is or will be part of the plan. It was
Right.
always part of the plan
But I'm just
for our
trying to
sake.
figure out when, because I'm trying to
We
figure out
don't
when
know.
to take the trees down, and I need to know, kind of like have an idea when the fence is going to be like put up so I can...
We
I
don't,
don't
we
think
don't
we
know.
don't- we don't know.
We
We
couldn't
have to
even,
talk to the
we
house.
couldn't even
Is the
guess.
fence approved by the HTC?
You'll just have to be in touch with Ann to find out when it's going in, I think. Or maybe you guys could talk about when it makes sense for it to happen.
Ed,
like
do
when
you
they want
Ed?
to plant the Leland
Unless he
cypress.
wants to listen to this.
Do you think you need to stay on? It's up to you. You're welcome to.
I'll stay on. I'm
Okay.
in my car, so it's fine.
Depends on where you are.
Be safe. Okay.
So I'll be in touch with Ann.
I mean, the bet. Go ahead.
Depends. I don't want to have the same issue we had in St. Joe's where there was. Will it eventually be submitted for approval to the HCC?
It has to be.
Does it need to be?
Yes, it has to be. Yes, it
And
does.
there's a small section up the back. It kind of goes down my property line, and then it goes down my mother's property line, only to a point. Is that little back section going to have a piece?
Yeah, we talked
Because
about
I
that
know
last
Talked about
time.
that the last time.
Like-
There's already another, isn't there another fence back there that it's gonna join up to? Sure.
Yes.
That would help.
So I tried to do a panoramic.
You can come up and look at this if you'd like.
And you had a map too that shows
Yeah.
where the fence
Yeah,
is
the
going.
new plan.
This is the plan. And then I labeled each photograph with a letter. So that's where I took each.
Right, but where is the fence going?
Right here, just right along the construction.
And there's
You did not
this,
put it there.
and there was like a little section right here that I would like to have, not all the way down, because that's all like hilly. It's just a section right here.
So you're gonna have to get this put on the plan, so fence here.
It's right here. That's the fence that.
Oh, it should just,
line
oh, I see,
dot.
proposed 6.5
Yeah,
feet fence, got
And
it.
then there's a
How do you-
not all the way, there's just like a section right here.
Like to do,
You can see where it would end, literally, because then there's like a hill that you can't.
Yeah, I thought we discussed that the fence was gonna
what
be
was
like
gonna be
out.
along the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
here.
That wasn't my understanding. I thought it was just.
No, you guys
around
mentioned the last time it
Yeah.
would go in the back to,
Mhm.
just to a point.
Yep. That's true.
I'm just thinking about our costs. This is $9,000. When we talked initially, you said you might help us with the cost.
I'm not, I did not say that.
It affects our costs. I would like to have the fence along one side of the property.
I think we talked about having it fenced in because there's gonna be, there's potential to have so many people. I
think that-
explicitly.
I know, my
yeah.
father wanted a section right here.
I remember us talking about that. I can look through my notes. but-
Excuse me, Dad, I may bow out, but could you just
Let me look and see.
summarize, is it okay for me to work with Eleanor and Roger to shape up that draft comprehensive permit?
Absolutely. Yes?
Okay.
Yes.
And
Right. I think I will sign on unless there are any other further questions. I'm not going to have anything to add on the fence.
No, I know that. We're good with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Ed, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
there seems to be some disagreement whether or not we had discussed having a fence come along the back part of the property line as well. I do remember.
I do
something we were
too.
Talking about that there was a lot.
And
either-
it's not a big set, it's not like it's the whole, it's just a certain section on it.
How many feet is it?
It's right here. That's
Why
the
did we
picture of
say
the
this
area.
place?
Well, this is split rail fence.
Yeah,
There's no
this is-
solid fence?
No. This is where the rock is. I'm way over in this corner. It would go like maybe to about there, like all this.
No, but I'm gonna look.
It would come down like here.
Okay, let's get this over with. Ann, can you add 12, or 2 sections?
I mean, this is like, that's the area here. There's all this, there's a ton of
That doesn't help
vegetation.
with noise.
Let's one at a time.
And
Please.
this is $9,000, this area here. So that, that's gonna be another $7,000.
No, I'm not
But
talking,
I
I'm not
rem-
talking, I'm talking about 12 feet, 2 sections.
She wants it up to here.
Well, she's
Okay,
saying to where,
okay.
where the,
Eleanor just told me that FinCom is at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So,
So-
but I do remember we talked about the screening in the back and that it wasn't enough and that we wanted a fence.
Okay. I don't recall, but I'm
I
gonna
mean, does it
go
go
with
like
it.
I
where?
don't know how to make this lay
It's
out
probably
for you.
like 12 to 12, probably, just like a section.
Well, section's roughly 6 feet, okay?
Right, like I remember us saying the split rail fence was not enough.
Yeah, I know that. Okay, the fence. Board members, what are we gonna do about it? More fence, less fence? We don't need any more participation.
More
Less,
fence.
more.
More.
Well, I think you always want to make sure that the place is, that it's screened from the public view.
Well-
And I can't remember, I don't honestly, I do sort of remember that it was gonna go on the side, but I don't know for what distance. It does look fairly well vegetated. I don't know.
It's due to the noise, things echo off
And
of that high school.
Can you make the fence out of pressure treated versus cedar? Did you get a price at cedar? check it out, because you don't have to bring it up this second. I'm just saying,
You can do that.
I'm saying
Longer fence.
there might be an alternative expense-wise. Maybe we can get this into the final draft. Why don't you see if you can mitigate the cost first, and see if within the budget you can fit another, 12 feet, 16 feet? Let's come up with a number
Well, I don't know.
to make the
the
corner.
Scale.
You guys are killing me. Come on.
I can measure it and
14
tell it,
feet,
call
'cause you're gonna
Ann.
need 2 6-foot sections
10,
maybe.
20.
With the plus, okay. 20 feet,
That's 20
14?
feet would take you to roughly the other side of Unit C.
done. 20 feet, okay?
If this is to scale at 1 to 10.
Okay, done with the fence. We good with that?
Yeah, and also Thanksgiving Day, and I don't really complain, like, I know noise jobs have to be done, but on Thanksgiving Day, there was one worker pounding nails at 6:30 a.m. in the morning.
It's not
I
very
was-
friendly.
And I had a couple other the neighbors. I didn't call because I was up fuming, but I don't know if somebody called because he was gone about 40 minutes later. But 6:30 on Thanksgiving Day, it woke my tenants up. It woke other people up because of the banging. You know, it's like a quiet day. I didn't know if New Year's Day and Christmas Day, if we're going to have to look forward to that.
I think after your comments that you don't have to worry about Christmas and New Year's Day. Is that correct?
We did get a call. We called the GC, we called that person, they stopped working. There was some miscommunication about whether the workers were supposed to work, so they stopped working, but I will talk to my GC and make sure they are not working Christmas and New Year's.
What about Sundays?
I thought, can you work on Sundays?
Well, you can't be doing anything at 6:30 in the morning anyway, so that's just a moot point.
I mean,
Whatever the town regulations are.
this is outside of the old historic district, but
My
This
personal
is a-
feeling is if you are within the noise ordinance of the town,
You can work.
you can work,
Yeah.
because everybody's house was not dropped by the glacier, it was built at one point.
Right. And
So-
there are those regulations in the town.
That's my personal feeling. If others feel strongly that we should restrict this specific project,
well, the participants of the community effectively own this project.
yeah, that's
So, I'm just.
So let's-
But I agree that this is something that is a little extraordinary.
I personally think it's not very friendly
Yeah.
and neighborly and not a good idea when you're introducing yourself into a neighborhood to get in everyone's face, but
I would recommend that you
I'm not-
agree that there won't be any construction on Sundays.
Absolutely. No
Okay.
construction on Sundays.
Christmas, New Year's,
I'll just.
not before 6:30, there
No,
are
no worries.
rules.
I'll copy and paste, send over, make sure they have.
Who's the contractor? Not that it matters.
It's James Robinson.
It's in the packet,
Oh, it is.
in his contact, everything. Okay?
Well, thank you for, and just one more quick question. The project, does anybody know, like, is it 2017? Is that where I read something like it should be done sometime in 2017?
Whoever gets
We
the
don't
bid.
have a schedule.
Okay,
that's the
because
first
something came
year.
in the mail. I thought that's what it said, but I can't
In
remember.
the pro forma, it's 2017.
I mean, yeah, we want it done
Yeah,
by 2017, by the end of
And
this year.
it should be.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was just curious if they had an idea.
I mean, I think some outline schedule would be nice. I know it's hard because of the moving thing and whether or not you meet that, but I think that for neighbors, for us, and for yourself.
We can provide that.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next.
New information?
Go ahead.
Sally Ann Austin, 19 Surfside. I'm going to wear two hats with this. One is an abutter, one is a taxpayer. Go with the taxpayer hat first. As far as the whole pro forma thing, I have a 28-year-old daughter who just moved back to the island, single mom, really good job at the hospital, and we kind of looked into this. she can't afford the rent in this affordable housing, even with what she makes. So when you sit there and say, we're going to borrow this money from the bank and we'll just up the rent, but you're supposed to be affordable housing. And what we're worried about, and we've discussed this before, is that when you push people into that uncomfortable range with the rent, then they start renting out the other room. They start renting out the basement. They've got their cousins sleeping on the couch to pay the rent. And this is what we're trying to avoid. And Ann has said, well, when that starts happening, you call us and we'll take care of it. But Maya Comet Village has had the same issue. This is exactly what we don't want to see. We don't want this development ghettoing up the neighborhood. And I've brought this up before, that, you know, we are concerned that it's going to be a problem. So when you start talking about just upping the rent to cover this loan, then you're opening a whole other can of worms.
Well, let me just speak to a couple of those points. Number one, this is a 40B application. Our hands are not tied, but there are certain rules and regulations that we have to operate under. We're doing the best we can to make sure this project is a success. I don't think it's ghettoing up the neighborhood. The rental increase maximum was, per unit was, let's say, I think the maximum was $150 a month. And we want the project to work, and that's what we were speaking about on the pro forma basis. We want the numbers to be as accurate as possible. We're not suggesting that they raise the rent. If that's one way of doing it, cutting expenses is another. Every time we have a discussion and somebody wants a $9,000 fence, understandably, that adds expense to the project. So, you know, there are a lot of different things working here.
That's the price of a project. When I built my salon, my neighbor didn't want to look at the parking lot, and you guys made me put in 20-something arborvitae.
So you got CBA relief to build the salon.
Right, but I also had to do what I had to do to make the neighbors happy at my
And that's
expense.
what I think we're trying to get to here. I don't think we're ignoring the neighbors. I mean, there's a landscape plan, there's screening, there's fencing that we just discussed. No dogs. I don't. If you think that at the end of the day the project isn't going to happen, I mean.
No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying, as somebody who has a child that's trying to live on this island, and you are giving affordable housing, and then you say, well, we're just going to keep upping the rent.
Well, statutorily, it can only be upped to a certain point, and I don't have those figures in front of me any longer.
But the outcome of doing that is that that's when people start renting out rooms and to make the rent. And that's what we don't want to see.
I get what you're saying, but you can't have it both ways. Like, they have to pay for it somehow, and there are certain requirements they have to do. And if also making the neighbors happy and taking into account the density and making it look nice and having trash pickup and having somebody manage it and keep, that stuff costs money too. So something has to give, and they are allowed. There is a formula that says what the affordable rent is for someone making X dollars, and that's what it is. So I totally get what you're saying, but if they don't increase the rent, then they can't put in landscaping, right? Or if they, something has to give somewhere. So
we can do a more dense project or make an
yeah.
application.
First of all,
more dense.
Right.
The increasing of the rent
is minimal.
Was a suggestion that Ann made. It's a possibility. And the applicant could have come in, and maybe should have come in with the maximum rent plugged in, and it could always go down. But it cannot go beyond a certain point. So whether or not someone chooses to rent a room in their house, that's on the owner of the house anywhere. And it's certainly to rent it illegally, if it's an illegal basement apartment, for instance, I mean, that is on the owner. And the owner in this case will be Nantucket Housing. And, I mean, in some ways, I think you can take some comfort that there is a housing advocate as the landlord versus somebody who is interested in one thing and one thing only, the bottom line. And he's, you know, he or she, the landlord, is off island and really has no interest in the project other than making sure they get as much money out of it as possible. I mean, that may be small comfort, and hopefully Nantucket, Housing Nantucket does their job well.
I mean, to Housing Nantucket's credit, last meeting we talked about you guys putting in the higher rents to give yourself a little bit of a buffer, and they really didn't want to do that. I mean, I feel like you've resisted that, and that's sort of a last resort for you. So, again, it's an option, and you can always go lower.
Anyway, we're going to get to a little bit more refined pro forma.
Yeah.
Maybe the rents go up, maybe they don't. They can only go up, anywhere from $95 on the bigger smaller unit, I think, to $195 maybe on the max. I don't have it.
I have it.
I used to have it, but I'd have to do the math quickly.
It was 145, 195, 145, and 95 or something.
Right. So, and I know that every dollar counts, but it's not the difference between increasing the rent $95. I hope is not the tipping point to renting rooms in your house, because 10 to 1, if that's your intention, even though it's in the lease that you can't do that, and there is a landlord that's hopefully monitoring you. So be it. I mean, it's go ahead, next.
The other thing is we still don't have, we haven't seen what this is going to look like. Some things have changed. I talked to Linda Williams yesterday. I understand this plan has changed a little bit. The house they thought they were moving on the property is not moving on the property. Something else is moving on the property, and now one is being stick built. And I raised the question about why not stick build all four and have them conform, and it was the whole thing about being sustainable, and it was too expensive to stick build, and
well, I think there is a plan on the stick built one, right? I saw a plan, so we please forward that. There are pictures of the Loretta Lane cottage, which is
and drawings in the packet.
and drawings.
last we knew it was Lowell Place.
No,
Lowell
that
Place
hasn't
did
been
not
done
work
for a
out.
while.
I believe.
Loretta Lane, even last meeting we were talking about Loretta Lane.
Loretta Lane may not work out because of a timing issue. There is.
So was there a
chicken
meeting
and an
we
egg
missed
thing
because
here.
we didn't know that? We thought it was Lowell Place was the last time we were here.
We were here in November. There was
Right,
a
Lowell Place
hearing.
was the one that was being,
That was in October.
I don't think you were here in November.
okay, because we don't get notified when there's meetings either.
Every
We have
month.
we have
Every
no
month. Notice.
we have no
month.
communication going.
It's public
It's
notice, and if
publicly
you have a
noticed.
question, you can always email me, as I've told you multiple times. It's on the town website.
You
I
can-
think
you
it's
can-
a
post
fair,
it to town
it's a totally fair concern to want to know what it looks like. The thing is finally taking shape. Not finally, but it's taking shape. We're beginning to see what every building is going to look like as numbers are developed, as opportunities are found in terms of that little Red Lane house. So I think we need to share that information. It is available through Eleanor. Eleanor has all that
You can
information.
actually go on the website and have them notify you every ZBA new agenda that comes in, because I get it I signed up for another reason, but, so you can do that. If you go onto the town website, it says, alert me of new agendas from the zoning board of appeals, and they'll email you, give you a link to go look at the agenda, so every month you'd be notified.
It's also in the paper 2 weeks in a row.
Well, that's how I found out about this meeting, was just seeing it in the paper, and
Yeah.
nobody else really knew what was going on.
That's the requirement, though. is
Right.
to-
But I just feel like the neighborhood's kind of in the dark with
Well,
what's
yeah.
happening.
Is what?
Is in the dark with what's happening. I mean,
Well, it's public. This is public stuff.
Everything is
Again,
public.
Ann, I think you probably made a little more effort, or maybe you have, just in terms of the building hours and this kind. Just be sensitive to the neighborhood, but It is public record. I
Can
mean,
you
it's
put a packet
available
together
through.
and email the packet of all the buildings that you foresee getting? I know that they're not all.
Or do like a, get concerned
Okay,
neighbors
we're not going to
emails,
solve.
whatever.
We
Yeah.
need to keep moving.
Yeah. And
Sorry
my
to
other
say.
issue was they were working Sunday morning before 7 o'clock, November 22nd, the day we took the pictures of the house being taken apart and reconstructed. And, yeah,
That
maybe
is
there should be
totally
an overseeing
That's a fair
job
point.
site person, because it seems to be, sometimes there's nobody doing any work over there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then we got 10 people over there on a Sunday morning or Thanksgiving morning. It's just kind of
Ann, would you like to speak
haphazard
to
over
that?
there.
Please.
I'm going to talk to my contractor again and make sure they know no Sundays and no holidays.
And maybe, I mean, I think putting together a schedule from him of what you guys should expect for progress, maybe that'll make your oversight a little easier until you set up your person that's going to help you, so that you know what progress is happening or what's not happening. And
I think a schedule,
would be helpful.
an overall
And-
schedule
and maybe
There
outline.
there have been
So then
issues.
you'll
There was
know.
an issue with the foundation on the cottage that was moved, then the cottage gets disconstructed, and...
Yeah, I mean, some of that is unforeseen. I mean, anytime you take a building, you think it's going to be great, you get it there, and you have to.
Oh, I know, we've moved a house from
Yeah, so,
Monomoy,
I mean, I
which is a
understand that there's
joy.
things that happen that you don't foresee,
Thank
or
you.
that they haven't foreseen, so.
It's not perfect, but
But it'd be good if the neighbors could kind of be kept in the loop, because
the neighbors are not, we're not going to start a policy where I don't think, well,
Where we start.
No.
a law,
where we
you better
start
bring in the-
being the conduit for information to neighbors. It's available through Eleanor. Eleanor works not 24/7, but a lot of hours. She's there. She's available by phone or email, and I'm sure happy to share information as it comes in.
And the
Sometimes
next
we
meeting
don't
is
have it.
January 8th, 1 o'clock.
Potentially, well, I'm not.
January
here
8th?
14.
14th.
Oh, we're going to have a
Oh,
special
14th?
meeting.
Something here said.
I have the 14th.
Oh, then I'm here.
I have the schedule right here.
Great, then I'm here.
Yeah, I think it's the 14th.
It's really up to the applicant for the level of neighborhood outreach that they want to participate in. So it's not something that's, I mean, we encourage it, but it's not something that we drive.
Yeah, in terms of,
It's not
the
bad.
town notification system is not perfect, but, and Eleanor, help me, if we don't notify the neighbors every meeting. You're notified the first time,
And you gotta.
and then you have to, not you, one has to pay attention to the next meeting schedule. The burden is on the neighbor, unfortunately.
we would just like to see a plan, something with the...
So would we.
So then I
And
think,
we're
then
getting
that's
there.
something
I think
to
we're
address
telling-
to Ann, and
Yeah.
you and Housing Nantucket need to work that out.
Yeah.
It's not us.
Is there anything else?
No, I was just saying, the last time I looked at plans, I had to steal Mike's plans to have something to...
Well, again, the plans that you saw even 2 months ago are no longer the plans.
Right,
We are
that's
getting
my
new
point.
plans. Oh, and it's a
But
legitimate
it is
point.
a process. I mean,
It's-
this is a long process. It just is.
And it's made more difficult by the recycling program of the houses, because if it were all stick-built, we would have had plans day one, seen what everything looked like.
Exactly.
Move forward.
But
We
Right.
don't.
I like the fact that it's recycled.
I don't have a problem with this. I'm just saying it's hard.
It is
Yeah.
hard, but it's a nice program, and I hope it's successful.
And it's hard to say this is great and this is what we want to look at. I mean, Vicki and I have been living there for 50 years, and we can't afford to leave. We're stuck there. We're going to die in our houses. And that's just the way it is. So this is kind of invasive to our neighborhood, and it is a big deal. I mean, I'm 2 houses away from the project, and I can hear car doors slamming. I can hear the construction guys out there. I can hear the
Well, you
work
know
being
what?
done.
I think it could be worse, though. I
And
really believe.
right, but it is a big deal to us because we are
Okay,
right there.
unfortunately, we got to move on this
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
January 14th. Please try to be proactive yourself with Eleanor to get the information as it comes in. You get a chance to read the draft comprehensive permit if you'd like. It's all available. So we are going to continue this. I think we've made clear what we would like to see.
How do we do the sewer?
The sewer, if you want to try to get somebody to get you a freebie, go for it.
So- It would be good because then you wouldn't have
I
to
would.
perform
You
it.
said you wanted to see some kind of indication selection as to how they.
Because if they're not going to waive it, then you need to get the cost into the performance.
I mean, I would be doing it now because, again, you need to plug that into. We're concerned that the project works financially, at least on paper, from day one.
And you have a
Because an unsuccessful financial project is going to be an eyesore. The neighbors are going to be unhappy. It's not going to be finished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have other funding sources, you want to, whatever, however it works. But that's our concern. Okay? Susan, I interrupted
No, it's
you,
fine,
and
because
apologize.
I was gonna say something
I
about
have
it, but
my
it's
chocolate.
it's whatever.
Okay, so can I get a motion to continue to January 14th, please?
Motion?
Can we do the other 3 and 6 minutes?
Yes, we're going to do the other 3 and 6 minutes. Let's go.
No, actually, that's being covered upstairs. So you
Okay,
can
thank
have
you.
it.
Okay.
Did we have a vote on that? All those in favor? Who seconded the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Susan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Jim, you want to sit on this?
Exhausted.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Mark?
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 Jim?
Mark?
Come on, man.
Mark can't sit on this one.
Yeah, it's a conflict. He's got to.
It's unacceptable.
Well, I was gonna not sit. You have to go. You have to go.
We sit on the next one, right?
Yeah, I just want to organize this stuff before I forget, and then I'll
But
do this next.
Jim can sit on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but Mark, you still need me, because Mark can't.
I'm not going.
Is that right?
Right, yeah. So
So
that's
Jim's gonna go over there.
right. So
I
that's
have to
5.
sit.
Yeah.
What?
So Jim, come on up.
Are you telling me that that's the time?
I made that up.
Ed?
I just have my chocolate. I'm good. Okay. I think I'd like to make a motion that the chairman's doing a crummy job of moving these meetings along. So I would like somebody to depose me quickly. Chairman? You have been here the longest.
Have I?
Well, Sarah's been here pretty long, so let's.
No, you're right. Sarah doesn't want to hear
Still
this.
being changed.
I gotta find my agenda. Hold on, Sarah. I lost it.
Oh, I think I stole it. I was cleaning up. Here, use this. Use this packet.
Okay, we are finally, mercifully, on to new business. 4115, 42 Union, LLC, 11 Fayette Street, for the applicant, the esteemed Ms. Alger.
Sarah Alger for the applicant. As you know, I originally filed this application as a zoning administrator application because I felt it fell squarely within the provisions of the bylaw, but I know the board decided that the neighborhood needed an opportunity to be heard, so I'm glad that we're here to do that. This is a lot that was created under 4181L, and as a result, under the bylaw, has the status of a pre-existing non-conforming lot. There is a pre-existing non-conforming structure on the lot. You may know that this is a portion of the property that was the funeral home. We've went around and around quite a bit with the Historic District Commission about what to do with this existing workshop. They very much wanted, our original plan was to relocate it and then build something that was conforming so that we wouldn't actually need any zoning relief, but they were quite insistent that that building stay and be renovated. So the current...
I have to admit, I only heard the end of it. The HDC wanted you to do all this?
Yes, they like the building, and they feel it's important for us to maintain it.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So what we're doing is we're picking it up, we're sliding it northeast to the extent that we can to try to get it off that southwesterly setback, so we're at least 3 feet off that line. and we're going up a story, adding a small 272 square foot addition and creating some conforming parking. So once we're done, the lot will conform with ground cover, parking, and use. It's currently non-conforming as to use, but it will remain non-conforming as to the side and rear yard setback.
Okay, thank you. The building actually gets a little smaller, doesn't it, that portion?
That little portion is getting a little smaller, that's right. Not much, but a little bit.
About 3 feet. So it doesn't really get relocated.
It's getting kind of picked up.
Not really. I mean, it was 6.4, and now it's going to be 6. Or is that 5 point? Yeah, that's a 6.
Yeah.
So now it's 6.3.
They're cutting off a little piece of the end.
They're cut.
Okay.
But it's not really being moved, but whatever.
I guess not really significantly, correct.
And then there's no setback from Fayette Street,
That's a zero setback on the front.
So that, it's continuing that 3.5 down that southerly property line.
I guess
Correct.
my question when I first saw this was, why not just go to the 5 and be
If they
done
don't
with it?
have to. Right?
Well, they get it on the side.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. It's a question. You might not agree with me, Lisa.
Well, I'm
It
telling you
really
why
comes
they
down
don't.
to the fact that
On the side they do.
the HDC wouldn't let us make significant changes to this
No,
building.
I'd say, why can't the addition be conforming?
Oh, why can't the addition be conforming? Well, it's so small as it is. I mean, it's not like this building
make
is,
this stuff up.
you know.
I mean, it could be smaller.
It's only 17 feet, so it would have to go to 15 feet wide.
15 feet 6. No, I meant why. Yeah, why couldn't the whole thing,
And the neighbor to the
since it was being moved?
southwest has no issue with this.
Southwest, it's the same owner, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would hope you would have no objection. I object! Where is he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, it's not like we're surrounded by other neighbors who are upset by what's happening here.
You never know. I mean, the reason it appears that it isn't moved so it meets the 5-foot setback on that side is so that the air conditioning can fit within reason. That was really my question. Why couldn't the whole thing just shift 1.5 feet and be?
It's not going to make a difference though, because you're not going to get the 5 feet on the west.
Right, 'cause
No, you're not gonna-
2.2. You get a little.
All right.
You get a little closer as you move to the
Just-
north, and then you have the AC units to deal with.
Right.
Well, it's the AC, and by going 1.5 feet, you
So
would.
you'd have to give them relief for the AC.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be 1.5 feet though. It would be a foot.
No, 3.5 to 5. He's saying on the south. I don't have an issue with this.
Oh, that's 1.5 feet, but we'd be going, if we only have a foot on the other side, we're already at 6.3.
Well, you have a 1.3. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, so let's move on. Anybody?
I don't have any issues with it. There was a Eleanor's. Well, anybody else should speak. I was going to look at what Eleanor.
Is there any mail on this?
No.
No, ma'am.
And you putting conditions here? This information. June 15th, Labor Day.
FinCom? Thought we had some audience members.
You can keep wishing. Keep me here another hour, maybe there will be some.
Maybe if we move
Some
them quicker.
carolers or something.
Incidentally, do you know that zoning board meetings are the least watched meetings?
I got it. Okay, we have some other business to discuss after. Jim,
I
you
think
got
we
any
need to
questions
move
on this
this
one?
one
No,
along.
no.
No, you okay with it?
Yeah.
Karen?
Good to go.
I'll make
Mike?
a motion,
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the relief as requested, and, did anybody look at Eleanor's decision?
Put the,
I mean, it has-
put the condition in that we can't build during the,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's there already, June
Okay.
15th to Labor Day.
No Sundays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or New Year's.
the people who were building across from me build 24/7.
They didn't get relief, though.
I'm not complaining either,
You
by
were
the way.
complaining.
I want them to build. I want them to build as
done.
quickly
Wow.
and as long as possible.
That's
Because
Think
the
you're
more they
upstairs, Rick.
build, the sooner it's over.
Yeah,
Upstairs.
yeah. You can stay. We're having a good day.
Okay, so I made a motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Yeah, yeah, forget it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Okay, who's next? Mark, you want to sit?
Yeah, Mark, why don't you sit? Come on down. Come on.
I'll sit, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He's gonna sit too. You have to,
Oh,
someone
we-
else has to sit.
Yeah,
No, we,
Yeah.
two left, we need two replacements.
You need to sit.
Come on, Mark, you're slowing the whole ship.
Take offense to that.
Moving up in the world.
Okay? Let
Hi.
me introduce you. 4215 Karen D. Ward, 50 Appleton Road, for the applicant.
Hi, Brian Swain, attorney for the applicant. This matter is before the board seeking a special permit to remedy an unintentional setback intrusion. By way of background, my client's dwelling was constructed on an oversized lot, which was subsequently subdivided in 1980. If you look at the subdivision lot, you'll notice that it was drawn 10 feet from the northern portion of my client's house.
Page 94. I was just telling you.
Okay.
Page 94.
Oh, great,
That
thank
was
you.
later confirmed through other as-built and plot plans, and it wasn't until 2011, which I'm guessing through advances in surveying equipment, that the northeast portion of my client's dwelling is actually 9.3 feet and 9.1 feet respectively from the lot line, so it's protruding into the setback. And what we're asking for is a special permit to validate the siting of the house in its current location.
Okay. I mean, Eleanor did some forensic work at the building department, extensive forensic work, I might add. And there were a couple of interesting points, but I can't find them. That's something else. Well, one was that one of the applications specifically talked about cutting this portion of the building off. And I've obviously got the application approved on that basis, and then that work was never done. You have any insight into that?
My understanding is that when my client applied for the building permit, there was a verbal agreement to remedy the problem, whether it be to cut the building back or get a special permit. I've had conversations with Marcus, and he said to seek this avenue.
Well, it wasn't verbal. It was on the application. I don't have it in front of me, but
I don't know whose writing that was, by the way. It says DB, that could be Donald Bear. Donald Bear?
I thought it was right on the application,
It wasn't SP?
the building permit application. It's on the staff memo, not on the packet.
Dan Bear, DB, Dan Bear.
Who was an owner at one point or something, right?
Yes, he's still, I believe, co on that one.
But this was page, there was a building permit yeah, there was, no. I mean, again, I'm not saying it's a big deal, but it was, it says removing 1 foot of north end of house.
That might have been an option at the time. I think right now, under the code in 13916C2, you know, if the burden of correcting the problem by, in this case, cutting part of the house is outweighed by this board granting a special permit, I think that's applicable here.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't have a huge problem. I mean, I do think it was probably a surveying technique issue. Became more accurate. Josiah or whomever probably rounded up to the nearest inch, foot, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you do see it on several building several pieces of paper that they were going to remove a section. It's on the HTC application, the yellow page 30 of the staff memo. Remove 11-inch. Whatever.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You can also see on the photocopy of the Zeminski cover that permit number 559-11, add, alter, amend 1, which was this 1-foot addition, has not received a certificate of occupancy.
Oh, on that chart?
Yes.
Interesting. So they just never did that work.
Well, no, the permit's still outstanding.
Right.
So this is a remedy that's, I believe, open to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, it's a little frustrating when you say you're going to do something and don't do it. But having said that, I think it's reasonable to rely on the old survey, thinking you were 10 feet, only to be found it was 9.7 or 9.3.
So the question is, do we bless the encroachment, or do we reduce the property line setback, which I believe was the request? Was it not? Reduce from 10 to 5?
No, I don't think, I think we
Okay.
bless what's done, and never again can you go in the setback.
Works for me.
There was neighborhood opposition.
That's what it was. I read that letter. They didn't want it reduced to 5 feet along that boundary line.
And
I
then,
think it was Yakis, who was the former owner of the property, was one of the abutters that.
His email was to endorse it or validate the siting of the house as is, so long as there's no further intrusion into the setback.
ever. There were also other letters, but they seemed to be dealing with issues that were not necessarily germane, and Marcus
Four dwellings, things like that.
supposedly did his job and went out there and saw that. Now, one of the as-built specifically says secondary dwelling, and Marcus said there was only one dwelling out there, so I don't quite understand
Well,
how
they have
that
a
works.
permit to change a studio
Yeah,
to
they
a second
converted a
dwelling.
studio to a secondary dwelling.
That looks
No, I
like
understand that, but Marcus's visit was relatively recent,
Right,
I
right.
believe. Yeah. So I think.
Well, someone had complained that there were 4 dwellings on the lot, if I remember.
Yeah, but he inspected them all.
He inspected and said that that was not the case as far as. Yeah.
So I'm sure I'm not sure of anything with 10 to 1. They're human beings in there, but they're not dwellings. So what's the pleasure?
I'll make a motion to grant the relief as requested for no more further intrusion into that setback and to endorse or bless the existing footprint of the primary dwelling.
And-
I'll second.
and we're not making any comments about the other issues.
No.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience want to talk about this, Stephen? Come on, Mark. Come on.
I think you should grant it.
Because he wants to go on.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Who seconded? You, Karen?
No, Susan did.
Susan.
I seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So may I just repeat that you were granting the relief pursuant to 13916C,
Two.
The
Unintentional
unintentional.
setback intrusion.
Yep. Okay. Is this the last one?
Yes.
Mercifully.
4315.
4315, according to my colleague. Robert Gendron, trustee of 33 Federal Street Realty Trust. or the applicant, the esteemed Mr. Cohen? It appears that way.
Oh, I can leave.
No, please stay. So this, I hope, is a relatively simple application. I'm sure you're all familiar with the building that currently houses Stephen Swift on the corner of Federal Street. And there's a provision in the bylaw a few years ago that was allowed for buildings in certain districts to exceed the 30-foot height if it is found to be not essentially a nuisance to the neighbors and in congruence with the architecture in the area. As you know, most of the buildings that are around this building are well over 35 feet. There's, most of them are in the 35 to 45 foot range. This building has an interesting history in that there was an old building there that in 1984 Karsten tore down and replaced with a near replica. So this is not a historic structure. I'm seeking relief for a few things. One is that there are there's a special permit and a variance that exist for this building that are essentially based on the parking requirements. And since those parking requirements are no longer applicable, I'd just like it to be clarified in this decision, although I think I could just abandon those and not rely on them. But since we're adding to the zoning history here, I'd like to just clarify that those conditions no longer apply because there was a requirement for employee housing and a limitation on the use. And, I'd rather just take it as is under zoning now, since those restrictions were only based on parking. So that's one thing. That's a little housekeeping. Second thing is that my client is doing work that is on the building that is not within the setback, but I just wanted to point that out to you. And the third thing is that we would like relief to increase the height to about 35 feet. Just looking at the HTC elevations, I see that one of them is 34.1 feet. So I want to make sure that if you do it at 34, that we're not coming in, just a hair over and have to come back for it. I'd rather have a little extra. We are currently at the HTC, so I don't know.
That was what was in the
Yeah. So I don't know where we're going to end up with the final height, but I seriously doubt it'll be taller than what was applied for, which was 34.1 on the highest side that I can read in these plans. But I'd like, because I've seen it happen a dozen times, I'd rather have a little extra in the zoning relief. Yeah, it happened.
Where is the increase in height being developed in the building?
Well, it's essentially a new roof with some dormers, and the purpose is to allow for a full apartment up there, and I think there are interior plans that show it. I should clarify, too, that one of the reasons why I'm at the zoning board instead of the planning board is that there's both a zoning history for this, zoning permitting history for this structure, and also that the increase is essentially within the residential part of the building. There's no increase to the commercial aspect. There's a basement office and a street office. It's not really great, but we want to step up into it. There's no increase in the commercial part of the structure.
Is this a brand new residential unit?
There's an existing apartment. It looks to be bigger.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, it'll be much bigger. It gets a whole nother floor out of it. Right now, the third floor is not developed. Am I reading that correctly, Stephen?
When you say the third floor,
There is no third.
I'm including the basement, the first floor, and the second floor we have a plan for, showing no
Third floor.
third floor.
The attic essentially would get dormered out to become living space.
So you'll put up knee walls, dormered out, with the roof up.
Yeah, if you know the building where Isabel and Cleo is now, the yarn.
Sorry, don't shop there.
Nah.
I know it.
The blue building, it's essentially mirroring the roof line of that building, where we have the double dormer. But I don't know where that.
So what is the bylaw states you can go to 35 feet if you don't derogate from your neighbor's sunlight or something?
Yeah, it has three provisions.
Why, and we make that determination?
Yes.
So it's not really a right to do that. It's you have to come here to get permission to do it.
I think that's Right, and the board, I think, as you know, has, I think, always granted this permit, and I think it will eventually turn into something that the board may decide it should do at the staff level. But I think it varies on where you're doing it. It could definitely be in a different situation where you would be towering above your neighbor and causing a negative impact. But here, because it's all commercial, I don't know that it really matters.
Well, you're definitely towering. Your characterization of every building, or most buildings in the area, towering at 45 plus feet was a bit of an overstatement.
I should say
the Chamber of Commerce or whatever on next door, Yoshi is probably topping out at 14. The Chamber of Commerce 12. You know, that slum that the Board of Health has to operate. I mean,
the building, certainly the Yoshi building is small, and the town buildings across the street on Chestnut are small, but the commercial building on Federal Street, which I think is the
Bentuno
is the comp, is really a large.
Yeah, that's a
building.
large one, but the stuff across the street is not large either.
No.
So, I mean, across the street in the front, on Center Street or Federal.
There's an unusual pocket of 2 or 3 small in-town stuff.
It was just your characterization of
most.
My idea of most is most.
I will accept the corrections here.
As opposed to none.
I was just thinking about the streetscape from Federal, but you're right. There's a little buildings there. But
Visitors building.
At the end of the day, if this was in a residential part of town, going up tall might have a more significant impact than here. I don't think there's really any impact here. And that's what why the bylaw was designed to require people to come into you, to be the check on that, to make sure that it wasn't a situation where there was going to be a significant negative impact on the abutters. And here there's no abutters complaining, and
well, the impact to the town, if you will, is I know you don't need, it's the parking. All of a sudden you have a nice 3-bedroom apartment up there that, because you get the extra footage. Without the extra height, you don't get it. Because, you probably can't meet the code. So we have granted it on occasion. I can't remember the last time. The last one I remember was Eric McKechnie.
Didn't we do one down on Easy Street too?
Yeah, 14 Easy Street, which before they tore it down was 2 very small antique type stores, home furnishing stores, and then had Richard Loftus' office and the CPC in it. It was a relatively low use building, and it was replaced by what's now going to be a cafe and a retail space and 2 double-decker apartments with multiple bedrooms.
And we gave them relief to 35? I think that was
Part of it was
because
floodplain.
they made the argument of
They had a really good
floodplain.
lawyer.
Yeah.
Who came back twice?
I mean, that was a floodplain issue, supposedly,
Oh,
that we were hanging our hat on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would just clarify, the relief wasn't granted on the floodplain. The reason why we had to come back to go a foot taller was because
the engineering
right.
for the
Right.
The relief was granted on its own. It was the floodplain.
The bylaw had not
And you
changed.
never mentioned the floodplain in the first application?
You know, I don't know, it was a year ago.
We mentioned the
Yeah,
building
I
code
can-
issues, but the
I bet
bylaw
you-
had not been changed at that point to
Yeah.
incorporate Arthur's warrant article.
The floodplain song and dance was definitely because we needed another flood.
So he says now.
So I say that, yes. Anyway, I think that the relief requested meets the conditions in the bylaw. There's no abutters objecting, and we're happy to take conditions that the board would normally apply to this kind of permit.
How do we all feel about this bylaw change in general and our having to grant relief?
I think, I was just going to say before you ask that, like, how are we going to determine about substantially casting them in shadow? I mean,
You do a CAD survey with the sun coming up over
Right,
the building,
right.
the height and how it casts
Right.
shadows on the building
Right.
next to
I
it.
mean, that building that the Board of Health is in right now is so bad, and now it's going to be dark. And
well, then maybe they'll get a new building.
They should.
That's a pretty bad one.
that as nasty. No one should inhabit
I mean,
that building.
my view on number C is if, or letter C is if there were, that's really where the neighborhood complaints, or objections come in, and there's no nail on this one, right?
What would be, what were A and B? Refresh my memory.
A is both necessary and desirable to the restoration or preservation of an existing historic structure. if
Whoa,
applic-
what's a historic structure?
You know,
There isn't one, right, so you said that didn't
This is
matter.
not A, B, and C.
No.
Correct, yeah, A says if applicable at the end of it.
Yeah, if applicable. B is both complementary and appropriate to the scale of the adjoining streetscape, which is supported by the existence of surrounding buildings of equivalent height and the receipt of approval from the HDC and C, so.
We've determined the towers over
Now, the HDC approved it at 34.1, but you want some
No.
margin in that?
No, I'm saying it's currently before the HTC.
At 34.1?
At 34.1 on the tallest side. So actually, under zoning calculations, it might be okay at 34, but.
So even if we say yes, the HDC may say no.
I think we should mesh with the HTC, whatever you
I
get.
would agree.
Up to 35, we would
Oh,
when
is it
you come
35 or
back
34?
after getting that, we would sign
Yeah.
off on.
There's
but-
no actual limit.
Yeah,
in the
I
bylaw.
didn't think there was.
Yeah, there's not.
34 is what we've always been kind of targeting.
I'm sure they,
I don't really
I'm
have a
sure they
problem
could
with it
get the
'cause of-
point one out
'cause of
for
21 federal.
34. So we can,
Well, I think whatever the HDC approves is, it should be our exhibit for granting this relief, don't you?
yeah, do.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'd certainly take that as a condition.
And, no exterior construction ever.
Ever?
I get to bubble it.
The standard no construction in the summer language would be fine.
Yeah,
How do we take
and
care
I
of the
think
housekeeping?
Michael made a good point on the last one that the little building on Kite Hill. When are you going to start? If you don't start by a certain date,
You don't start until.
you don't start, because we don't want to see, oh, it's an emergency, we didn't get it done. You're not planning in any way, shape, or form to do that this year.
I don't know. I think that they're planning interior changes that might be unrelated to this work. So if you wanted to say no exterior work after, if they haven't started that part of it by a certain date, that'd be fine. But I think, in terms of interior changes that might be unrelated, I wouldn't want to see that one.
No, we wouldn't
Doubt
either.
they would be making a lot of interior changes without ripping the roof off first. Because
Well, downstairs maybe, but keep in mind, you won't have a building permit for 60 days minimum, probably 75 with the holidays. The appeal period and everything else that goes on after the decision is ready. So it takes you well into February, if not early March, before you can have a permit.
yeah, I think, I would say you can't do it this year.
Are you lifting the building?
I don't
The
know.
whole roof is
The
going.
roof is going to come off, but I don't believe we're separating from the foundation.
No, it doesn't sound.
It's a significant amount of work to take that roof off, rebuild it downtown.
Sure.
You're not going to do interior finish work and then have the rains come in.
Yeah, I mean, they might renovate the basement where Keith Yankow's office was until recently, or they might try to add that 4x6 little corner. There's pieces of this that might be unrelated, but I would generally agree with you that you wouldn't do finished work and then rip it apart. I just don't know.
Well, why don't we continue this until you do know? Seriously.
I think that your condition is something that you could craft without doing.
All right, then you can't start it and,
No exterior.
Well, they could do phase one permitting for some of the work that he talked about in the basement, maybe doing that little addition on there, but just not permitting the raising of the roof and rebuilding of the roof structure. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Well, it can very well happen, but it would be half done, finished on May 31st, and we'd be getting an emergency.
No,
That's why it's not gonna happen.
If you would like to condition the application or the relief on no exterior work related to increasing the height of the building until September 2016.
October.
October, yeah, whatever.
It's our
Works for
October
me.
15th, October 15th, yeah?
I never heard the date, is it? October 15th.
after Columbus Day?
Right. And then if my client wants to do interior work, they can, or if he wants to try to squeeze that little corner on, I don't think that's bothering anybody. But I understand you don't want to look at, like,
Broad Street.
the Broad Street where they, have that.
Well, the addition isn't before us anyway, right?
No.
The addition on one site plan seemed like it was
The
over.
addition and the interior renovations have nothing to do with the
No.
decision we're going to make today.
Yeah, but
Simply building the roof
the
up higher,
zoning
giving you
enforcement
the
officer needs clear instruction.
Well, I think you want, if we say
And I
no,
want that.
if we say no exterior construction, then, yeah, we want to be clear.
Yeah, and if they decide they're gonna do it all at once, then that's fine too. I just wanna preserve the ability to do some small things this spring if it doesn't put us in a situation where they pop the roof off and then I'm back here saying, even though we knew we were causing a problem, I mean, it's really, I get that.
All right.
We don't have a problem.
So do we want to
The
continue, or
writing's
do we
on the
want to,
wall.
We can move on.
we just have him get us a plan?
I think Mark's condition worked.
Yeah, all I was saying, we condition it to the HDC approval
Yeah.
component. We have to deal with the housekeeping
Yeah.
components if we want to just, what do we do?
I mean,
Just
do we
abandon
really
all the
want
relief that
to?
was
Yeah, do we
given?
really want to go backwards and start? Doesn't the zoning change basically take care of that? Why do we have to go back and sort of vacate old special permits?
It does. He just asked, and this has happened with Stephen Ford, he just likes to really clear the slate and make sure that going forward, there are no questions. For title purposes, we're leaving.
Yeah, it just makes it easier going forward.
It's not hard to incorporate that into a decision, it just,
The
wipe the slate.
relief was granted for parking waivers and for an addition to the building, and, those, because it was over ground cover and in the setback, and those are, still existing even though the parking's been waived. The conditions are basically limiting the types of uses in the building, requiring to come back for every new tenant, which actually was never done, I think. And then requiring requiring the apartment to be employee housing, which it never was for a travel agency. Which is,
All right, I don't care.
Okay.
So
we're granting some sort of
I'll
decision.
Try and craft a motion.
Go ahead.
Make a motion to grant the relief as requested contingent upon the HDC certificate of appropriateness being issued that references the overall height of the building. No work will commence on the roofing structure until October of 2016. I mean, I do this for a living, and I know the time frames of getting this stuff done. And I'm just trying to craft a motion here. If that's objectionable, that's fine. But
I think if the applicant's willing to do it, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, they're not rebuilding the whole building like the hotel or Nantucket had it. It's not a huge addition. I think you should, with the proper planning, be able to get it done.
the decision probably wouldn't be available until just before Christmas, and then you start the appeal period. You're running into January.
Yeah, I
then you
think your
have to
motion's
do your
fine.
cons-
And then what are we doing about the old permits? That's under the
I can modify, this can be a two-pronged thing, it'll be a modification of prior permits through a sort of partial rescission of previous conditions, and then there'll be the second part of, I've done this before, the second part of this decision will be a new special permit for the height.
Works for me.
All right, now, just to be clear on the HTC issue, it would certainly be no greater than 35 if they, in some weak moment, said, we would like to grant you an extra 5, because
I don't want
Steve's
Steve to go in
silver
there and
tongue
say, you know what, the zoning would give us
sways
35, you
them.
only want 34.1.
You know what the HDC, they really care what the ZBA has to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, they really do.
That's fine as an overall limit.
Yeah, we'll hang it on the COA.
Yeah,
That's their,
I'm just saying, if they came back and it was 38, because Steve hoodwinked them somehow.
All
right.
We can condition it to be no more than 34 feet 6, or do something like that. But why?
Well, I'm just saying, stranger
I mean,
things have happened.
the application's already before them, correct?
It's filed, yeah.
Yeah, so.
So I'm fine with limiting it to the COA with a cap of no greater than 35.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. I'll go against on it, since we have 4, right?
It's fine. Sorry, I didn't ask.
So 4.
4 to 1.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen, can I have your binder clip? If
Yeah.
you have to use it?
Yeah. Big one or small?
No, but
Small.
Karen doesn't like unanimity.
So Karen,
Karen, did you object or abstain?
Thank you.
Voted down. So,
Just cause.
All right.
Jessica. Fine, I only need 4.
that's my point.
Right.
So I had it.
I gotta turn my mic. Are we off, Sarah?
Oh, do we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.